Call our work session to order. Just a reminder for everyone and also to our residents who are watching us, our work sessions are very informal and we go directly to our agenda. And the first item on our agenda is the AE2S communications update. This is our branding and marketing initiative. And presenting this evening is Andrea Bowe and Nicole Gostad. And Skip, I believe you're teeing it up for us.
You did a fine job, Mayor. We're going to just move forward.
We're just going to move on, and everybody has met Andrea and Nicole, and so this is not the first time that you're before us. I think it's your third or fourth, and so welcome back, ladies. I think you've been very busy because we've had a lot of updates. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I am here to touch base on the wrap-up of the discovery period of the project, and so I'll just go through what we've accomplished thus far and the next steps we're going to be looking at in the next few weeks or so.
Okay.
So if you'll remember, the discovery period included the communications audit, and then it also included all the research. So the digital survey, the in-person boards that we did at the I Love Burnsville week, the party on the plaza, getting input from the community in a couple different ways, the partner meeting and some of those other things. So it was really gathering the data. And the communications audit was the first part of this. So we set forth with the city 3 goals as we looked at reviewing their communications. We looked at it from the standpoint of owned media, earned media, and paid media. And so your owned media is your website, your social media, all your print materials, those things that you produce as a media center yourself as a city. The earned media is the news releases that you'll put forth, the Today Show, things, those type of things that where you get press for. So you've earned that media. And then paid media would be the advertising, the promotions, sponsorships, those things that you paid for. So we just went through it in those categories. And you'll see on this slide, we just have a couple points on each one. We really felt overall the city did a great job at producing timely content, getting it out to your citizens really in a fast, efficient manner. I just can't say enough good things about your communications department. So the materials that they produce are great. What we saw, and because they produce so much content, is making sure that you reuse that content. Not just taking the time to do it once, but taking that material and using it in several different areas and medias so that you get the most play out of it, right? So those are just some of the tips that we gave. The opportunity to use hashtags on your social media, making sure that you use Beeville or whatever it happens to be, the brand that is developed through this process, making sure you always use those hashtags and create that consistency. In the earned media, it was looking at some of the possible awards that you could pursue in the future. You've earned quite a few already, but what are some other...
Congratulations, Marty, and your staff.
Yes.
Nice, great awards this year.
Yeah, great awards. How can we leverage those awards? What other awards can we pursue to elevate the city and the perception of the city? Looking at some of those. And then the paid media, the budget for paid media is smaller, and so what's going to produce the most bang for the buck in the paid media? And there wasn't a lot of paid media this year, but as we roll out the brand and the marketing tactics for the marketing plan, there will be some more paid media. The communications audit, this is just kind of diving into some of the things that we looked at. I looked at the analytics. We really found that you had a lot of great engagement and followers on all your social media channels, talked about ways to increase the audience.
When you looked at those analytics, did you see increases from last year?
Yes, there's steady increases year over year.
On Facebook and Twitter and YouTube? Yeah. We're not on Insta yet, Marty?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Let's go.
Not yet. So we just went through those different, we noticed, and I'm probably jumping ahead of myself too, is when we did the digital survey, we got some feedback on what people look at from the city. Where do they get their information? And that's kind of a slide coming up. This is a little bit about the website. What do people visit most? Where are they going to? What they search for? We looked at those different things. We talked about adding the translate features up front, and then also tracking the translate feature. So if people hit translate to a different language, what are the languages that are being most translated to, so that you can take that information and apply it to different owned media. So if you're going to broadcast something on your digital boards, okay, what's the next language? What are the different languages, thinking about translating, that sort of thing. Okay, this is going into the digital survey respondents, and this is a little bit about the demographics of the survey respondents. You'll see that the majority was female, which is not surprising because this was a digital survey that was mostly pushed out through social media. If you look back at your Facebook followers, the majority are female, and same with some of the other social media. So that's not really surprising. We had a nice spread of the ages. We didn't quite get as many of the 18 to 25 as we hoped to, but we did get a sliver of that. And then the other age groups, we had a nice spread among the different age groups. And then resident versus non-resident, we also had a nice split of that. The majority, of course, were residents, but we did get a nice chunk of non-residents as well. So this is the one that I was referring to earlier. This is really just great information for you to have. Where are people looking to get information from the city? We asked directly, where do you go to look? Well, they go to the website mostly, local TV, local newspapers, but it's really important to know that I think it was important that you update your website. That is a main area people go to look for information. The bulletin newsletter, you send out, 28,000 newsletters, and so you're getting a readership of 12%. That's a pretty decent readership from this sample group, of course. And then Facebook is the highest rated social media. Again, people use Facebook for news, a news source. As we looked at the results of the digital survey, these are the results that we're going to use to build the brand. So we wanted to see, what do they love about Burnsville, and we heard the parks, the natural setting, the location. It's a great location. We can get to everywhere from here. We're close to the city, we're close to our work, we're close to parks and amenities. Location was a big thing. Affordability, especially for young people in the younger age groups, 18 to 25, that 26 to 35, affordability was a big deal. They're entering the housing market. This was a great place to start. The diversity among, I would say, the age groups of must have been 36 and up. Diversity was mentioned quite a bit as a positive. Yep. They loved the opportunities that the diversity brought to the city. And then, interesting enough, among all the age groups, they felt the community was safe and friendly and welcoming. So as part of this discovery period, we also wanted to talk to people one-on-one and in groups. And so we reached out to different groups of people to get their input. These were just some of the comments that they had, what is unique. It mirrored a lot of the digital survey responses we got. Some of the challenges of Burnsville is the limited affordable housing. Obviously, people are coming here to look for affordable housing, and so having that stock available is important. And then this was kind of a fun little thing that we did with the partners group. We called it Operation Branding Burnsville. And it was basically an outline of a person, and we go through all the senses. So what do you see when you see Burnsville? How does it make you feel? What do you love about it? When you're talking about Burnsville, what are the things that come out of your mouth? And so we went through this process with the partners group, and those are some of the things that came out of that discussion as well. Diversity was a big discussion point. The partners group felt it was such a positive for the community. A great place for family. There was a lot of mention of parks and just areas for families to be together. So that was some great information as well. And then we also talked to a DECA group, high schoolers at Burnsville High, and that was a really interesting group to talk to and learn some things from their perspective. They also felt diversity was incredibly important. They felt it was a strength of their school. They enjoyed it. So we talked about that. They felt the city was very welcoming and kind and friendly. They were bothered by the negative perceptions that sometimes swirl around the city. It bothered them because they really feel it's home and they have great pride in it. So, but we had some interesting discussions about that. One of the things that we pulled out of it too is, where do you see things about the city? How do you find out what's going on with the city? And they're like, well, I don't know. We have so many digital things coming at us that sometimes a billboard gets our attention more than
Is it a lawn?
a lawn sign more than anything. You assume as youth you're going to reach out through social media and digital platforms, and they're like, well, we're kind of overwhelmed with digital platforms. Sometimes a sign gets our attention more than anything. So some of those nuggets came out of that conversation. So. And then the event boards, talking to people at Party on the Plaza and back to the 80s. A lot of
going
this
through your background, parks was repeated.
repeated. People love the greenery, the natural setting, the parks. It was
But it was
a
good
big
for
deal.
their families. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the third grade essays, they were great to read. Again, with the parks and natural settings, love that about it. So we've taken all this data, and there's a lot of it, read every bit of it. And so what we do next is we do the 3 Ps, we call it. So we put it into people, personality, and place. And so this is just a little snapshot of taking bits of data from the survey and interviews that we've had, but you can see that we start to really kind of itemize it so that we can start developing those themes. And those themes come from the 3 Ps. Our team works on what we call connector words, and those are words that emerge from our creative sessions that we're pulling from this data. So people may have not said those words, but together it creates that connector word that we can pull from it. So that's what we're doing right now. And we met with the project team earlier today and went through these 3 Ps and how we're pulling them out and pulling them together and talking about connector words and really forming those themes. And this is the schedule that we're on. I'm happy to say we're still on schedule, so that's good. We're rolling along. And we are reducing the themes to, we've come up with, I don't know, there may be 20 or 25 themes that have emerged, and we're going to reduce them down to 10. And then what we do is take them forth to different focus groups. So we'll take them to different age groups and cross sections of people and then we'll narrow them down to 3 based on focus group response, and then we'll bring them forth to the council.
Any questions? I liked what you did because this is your connector words.
Yeah,
So
that's a
it
word
highlights
cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's everything that you've talked about, but that's really good. I like that they think that we're a welcoming community because we talk about it.
Yeah.
And that it's friendly. So,
I do have a question.
yes. Vince,
Is there any I'm just kind of
looking through the responses to the survey, and obviously you're not gonna get everybody that's, rainbows and sunshine, but is there any consideration to some of the negatives that were on the list?
Yeah, and actually it's interesting because we look at the negatives too in terms of when we're looking at a theme. An example is one we've done last year, 2 years ago, where there was a emerging theme of nobody's going to want to move to this community because we're in the North Pole and it's cold and everybody hates it here. And that is something that we took and said, okay, let's try to, that's authentic to this place, so let's try to change that a little bit and make it okay. Some of the negative things that we saw in this survey were more about, there wasn't enough housing stock. There was too many apartments. There was, some people felt that there was a crime issue where other people overwhelmingly felt safe. So you kind of have to balance those a little bit. Like the high school DECA students had said, that was reiterated in some of the survey things where we feel like we get a bad rap for being low income, or people view us as low income or something like, of that nature. And that's really important to also address in these themes a little bit too. So we do take that into consideration, but and I guess the one thing that's probably was so obvious on all of them, and I'm skipping it maybe because it's so obvious because it was in the strategic plan, but there was a lot of comments of, we don't like the negative perception of the school district. That was probably the primary one that was noted in the survey. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. You've already addressed it. You've already called that out in the strategic plan, and that's part of the marketing tactics of the marketing plan. So to see that reiterated in the survey also said, okay, this is true, we're on the right track. What do we need to do about this? We have these people over here that love these things. Here's the school district. How can we change the message to make sure that we address all those?
What I found interesting in those negatives, because there was a negative on diversity, but there was also the strength on diversity.
Right.
So when you put all of that together, then when you go down and say, who answered these? 80% of Burnsville and 80% of the people surveyed and spoken to are still Caucasian. She had a high white population.
Correct.
So you look at that and you say, diversity is great or diversity is bad, and that's how you balance it out, because the students were saying that wasn't important. There was a story in your background that talked about a student who moved away, and he was in a school district that was homogeneous, and he chose to come back because he missed the diversity.
Correct, yep.
So when you look through all of the data that you presented, it was very interesting, and to read some of the stories that you included in that. But I found it interesting that Burnsville is still primarily highly Caucasian. I'm really anxious to see what the census is going to do next year, because 10 years ago, the census said that we were 22% minority and 78% Caucasian. So when you look at what you did in terms of your survey, so I'm really anxious to see what the census is going to present to us.
Right.
Yeah, and it still says we're a welcoming community. Okay, any other questions, comments? I think you guys are doing a fabulous job.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
do want to say
Yes.
about that. I had a neighbor approach me about a week ago, and she'd been reading about what we're doing here, and she was very excited that we were creating a marketing program for our city, because she understood that, we compete for business and residents just like every other city, and she just felt it was great we were doing that, and she also liked the fact we're working with the school district, that we're all coming together to kind of change perceptions, because she has kids in the district, and she thinks it does a great job for them, and And a lot of that perception is not founded. It's just that there's other issues going on there that, because the district itself does a great job.
It does a great job, and it's a matter of getting the word out, right? And spreading that message and making sure that everybody understands what a great job they're doing, because they have some wonderful
Our parents
programs.
are tired of people blaming the district for the troubles, because it's not always the district.
Okay. Any other comments, feedback? Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
And thank you for a very thorough job and also the information that you give us. Background material was great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you next time on your timeline here.
August.
Yes, yeah, next month. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the review of our city animal ordinance, and presenting this evening is our chief, Tanya Schwartz, and our police service manager, Lynn Lemke. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Council. So we have some information to share on animal licensing and some pros and cons of the licensing, having a animal license or not, and some options for the council to consider. And Lynn Lemke, our services manager for the police department, is going to share some information with you. She manages the contracts and is very familiar with the licensing, and then we will answer any questions that you guys have, so.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Madam Mayor and council members. At the direction of council, we reached out to 28 other jurisdictions and received responses from 26. So we felt like we got a really good base. Burnsville, as you know, currently requires biennial licenses for dogs, cats, ferrets, and chickens. And first and second year fees are half as much as the first year fees for the dogs, cats, and ferrets, and then the chickens are $52 per year. So the 7 agencies listed here currently do not require licensing, and as you can see, some of them have not been licensing for quite a while now. So they responded that they've received positive feedback from citizens. It saves staff time in managing the licenses. The one con was they sometimes have a little more difficulty reuniting animals with their owners if they're picked up. 5 agencies that we heard back from offer lifetime licenses, and again, they've been doing that for a few years. Same positive feedback from citizens, saves time and money. They did mention the loss of revenue as being a negative, as well as a lack of getting up-to-date rabies vaccination information. The remaining 14 cities are very similar to Burnsville. They offer a 1 or 2 year license fees ranging from $10 to $50. Sorry, this is a little hard to see, but this is a quick snapshot of the number of licenses that have been issued over the last 5 years. City revenue, animal control revenue for licensed sales, animal control revenue for unlicensed penalty fees, revenue for residential kennel licenses. So if someone has 4 or 5 dogs, it requires them to have a residential kennel license. The number of dogs and cats impounded and reclaimed, and then the number of bite reports that we take annually. So the options for council to consider is keep the ordinance as it is, amend the ordinance to require a lifetime license for all of the animals, amend the ordinance to offer a lifetime license or a 1 or 2 year option, which is what some of the cities do. Amend the ordinance to eliminate licensing, or amend the ordinance to eliminate licensing of some animals and require it for chickens which is what we saw in some of the agencies as well. Other considerations, if you offer a lifetime license, would there be a grace period for a refund should a resident move out of the city or their animal would die? Loss of revenue to animal control vendor. They currently receive all of the revenue for licenses with the exception of the first year of the license. The city receives $6, and the second year, the city receives $3. And then,
And that's processing cost.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if the council elects to eliminate licensing, would you maintain the requirement for the residential kennel license? Our current animal control agreement is through the end of this year. It calls for automatic extensions if we're happy with the service they provide. And they may propose changes to the rates 90 days prior to the anniversary date of the contract. That's it. Questions?
Yeah, Dan?
On the residential kennel license, what are they doing there? Is this a doggy sitting houses, or
I'm
are they
sorry.
raising dogs on the residential?
No, it's just
Someone
typically
wants to have
residents who
Don't
want
we
to
have an
have 4 or
ordinance in
5.
place, though? You can't have residential kennels in R1 areas? Wasn't that in our ordinance at one time?
Yeah. That's right.
R1A is an exception
That's
to.
right. Because
Yeah.
R1A is that our rural area?
Yeah.
That's a
The
rural
okay, the
area.
rural area, we have the
Yeah,
except, but.
that's 1 to 2 acre
But
sites.
a normal neighborhood, you get 3 dogs, that's it.
No, you can have 4 or 5, but
Oh,
if
you
you
can now.
do, then you need the
When
residential.
did you change that?
Yeah, I remember that discussion about.
I remember when
limiting
we
the
changed
number
it to
of dogs.
3.
To just 3.
We changed it at the same time licenses for chicken licenses became.
That's when we changed it, but I didn't know we
Yeah.
went to 4 or 5. I thought we only went to
We'd
3.
still have 3.
Is it 3 without the kenneling licensing, and then the 4 or 5 was
But you
allowed?
can't have a
you
kennel
to-
license in my neighborhood.
In an R1?
Yeah. You can have a 1A, but
You can
not-
have a
but
residential kennel
You
license,
can.
yes,
So I can have 5 dogs in my neighborhood with their,
as long as you have a residential
well, I
kennel
have been
license.
misunderstanding this ordinance since we had the chicken discussion.
You can get more dogs.
Yeah, so the thing is.
I can get a couple
yeah,
more now, yeah.
One of the things that I think as we have this discussion with dogs and cats and ferrets, let's make sure that that's on one side. The other, because just recently we had a lot of complaints about a neighborhood with the chickens.
How many
Oh,
chickens we have?
Oh, there's a neighborhood, so I saw all of those complaints. You probably didn't.
I-
But they had.
Maybe I like chickens, so they don't complain to me.
Well, there was over 10 chickens and a rooster, and it created such a stench, Jenny, isn't it?
Well, we have an ordinance against roosters.
We do have
Oh,
an
yeah,
ordinance,
well,
yes.
and they had and it caused a lot of
Visiting roosters.
issues with this neighborhood. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
They do.
Yeah,
lot of chickens.
so I don't know, and maybe there are some stories that, and that's real recent. Was this last month when we received all of those complaints?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is an ongoing enforcement issue, and the complaint is approximately 100 chickens and at least 3 roosters and
Yeah.
some goats in southwest Burnsville. So that's an ongoing code enforcement case.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a
It's,
whole, that's a whole
and it's
different
all,
issue.
that's all out of control.
Commercial grade.
And I can tell you that
Raising a farm out
the
there.
neighborhood is not very happy. And the stench,
Well, if they're operating a farm there, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
is
that's a farm.
unbelievable. So, all right, Kara.
And I remember when we had this on Roundtable.
Yeah.
I think, if I remember correctly, the consensus that we came to was dog, cats, and ferrets would no longer have a license. Chickens would still have a license. That's how I remember it being left.
And
And we were all like, okay, that
that-
we can live with.
Was that when you first brought this?
Yes, and
ask staff to bring back more information.
So this is the full comprehensive, but yeah, there was a,
yeah.
I remember that as well.
I agree. That's where it was.
So what are you all saying? Are you okay with no licensing of dogs and cats
And ferrets.
and ferrets? But we have to put a limit on chickens.
The kennel license, I'm good with keeping intact, so you don't have 100 dogs sitting in someone's neighborhood, but,
Okay, so that's one of the things that the
Yeah, but-
ordinance only calls for. How many dogs?
well, I thought it was 3, but I'm being corrected
Yeah,
here.
and Michelle
We voted
just-
on it, Dan, so.
Michelle is just checking, and it's
without a kennel
3.
license.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a kennel license. right?
Okay, Michelle?
You can have up to 3. If you have 4 or 5, you need a residential kennel license.
But you
Oh,
can't-
that's
but you
right,
can't get
that's
one
right, the
unless you're- but you
kennel
can't get one unless
license.
you're in a 1A.
Yeah. No, this is a kennel,
Anywhere.
kennel,
You can
kennel.
kennel anywhere. Okay.
So it's 3 if you don't have a kennel
Okay.
license.
Well, I just remember it was 2 when we started the conversation, and I had
remember
3
that.
dogs, so.
And I remember now it's kennel. You have to get a kennel license.
Residential.
Personally violating the law.
So,
Madam Mayor.
members of the council, yes, Dan?
Well, one of the things, and thank you very much for the background, this is, was very informative and more of a deeper discussion than we had the last time, because we've got a lot more research in front of us. But the one point about the licensing program was that when a dog is loose, you have a tag, so you have the ability to contact the owner.
That's right.
As a beneficiary of that process, a couple times when a dog got out some years ago, people called the number on the tag, and we were able to, minus that ID tag, I mean, the licensing sort of requires that. People can do that at the pet store on their own, and maybe most do. So there is a mechanism to replace that. My question is though, do we have any idea how many of all the estimated dogs, cats, and ferrets in the city are being run through the license, and maybe what percentage aren't even, which I thought was kind of the basis for your request, was like,
Because people don't do
we
it.
don't have much adoption of the process of licensing, and so why are we forcing it if maybe majority weren't even doing it? And yet we weren't enforcing and going around finding cats, dogs, and ferrets that didn't have a license, so I think we have better use of law enforcement's time. So any idea how many
Well,
unless you
total?
want
Well,
to go
it's
searching
really
for
interesting
cats.
to look at the number of licensing,
Yeah, it spiked in
Lynn,
2018.
995 in 2018, and I'm certain that there are more than that, dogs and cats and ferrets in our city.
Southwest Brownsville alone.
Interesting
I
that the
mean,
bites went up.
Animal control feels this is just a small portion, but nobody really knows for sure.
We could estimate maybe 10 to 20% at best are getting licensed, because I can imagine we probably have
Oh my God, yeah.
far more than just 995 total cats, dogs, and ferrets in the city.
And chickens.
Well, and I think responsible pet owners, they take care of their pets, they chip them, they put tags on them, I mean, they do that. The irresponsible ones, I don't care how many licenses we want to put on them, they're not
They're
gonna
never
do
going
it.
to follow it.
They're not gonna buy it, and they're not gonna do it, it doesn't really help us. And if you go to the Petcos or the Camp Bow Wows of the world and that, if you don't have your shots up to date, you don't use their services, they won't even let you in the door, so.
Right.
I mean,
Pet groomers, too.
The community itself kind of
Right.
self-polices a whole lot of this,
Yeah,
as
you
far as
can't
keeping the
come
rabies
without
and
the
all that up
shots,
to
right.
date.
A quick
Yeah.
follow-up, a staff recommendation that licensing requirements be consistent for dogs, cats, ferrets, and chickens. So it's sort of a all for one or one for all. If we're gonna do it for one, we need to do it for all.
Yeah.
Are you open to just chickens? Licensing the chickens and not?
That's-
I mean, is that
Yeah,
an
if that's-
enforcement
Yeah.
challenge?
Jenny
or-
would love that.
Chicken
Because
licenses
she's
do
the
we
To be
one-
honest, we have right now about 8 current licenses, but there are never, I mean, outside of this one complaint, we really don't get any complaints about chickens.
Well, I remember when we talked about it, and the whole city was gonna have chickens in their backyards, and I
Yeah,
knew that was
I
never
mean,
gonna happen.
People that have had them
Stuff
have
in
not
it.
renewed their licenses and no longer have them, so it seems like they kind of maybe run their course.
Yeah, they do, they
Um,
kinda do, I've watched them in my neighborhoods where they kinda come and go.
Kara?
With the staff recommendation of have it be consistent, I'm fine with that. I'm fine to have it be consistent, especially now hearing that there's 8 chicken licenses. Like in all of Burnsville, there's 8 chicken licenses. And the problem issue we have isn't that they don't have a license, it's that they're running a farm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the issue. Is they're running a commercial enterprise.
And
In a
it's
residential
disrespectful
area.
to their neighbors.
Sure.
So,
So it's not a licensing issue.
That's not a licensing
It's
issue.
a quantity issue,
Yeah.
which we have a quantity in our ordinance.
Correct.
3 dogs or 3 chickens or whatever it is.
Or 5
No
noise.
roosters,
Correct.
or as many if you have this additional licensing. So, yeah, I'm good with that too.
So what I'm hearing is no cost for license, so don't license
No
them.
license, right?
But we want to make sure that we manage the number of animals
Yeah.
per household,
That's
to avoid being a
absolutely
nuisance.
fair, yeah.
right?
Yeah, my question was gonna be, is this a public safety issue? And in the recommendation, it says it has little impact on public safety, so. Then
Yeah.
I guess I go to, if we did maintain a license and just made it free, would that be a cost? And does that even make sense?
that's a staff cost.
Lynn?
Just
I mean-
time and
It's gonna be a
Yeah.
cost. for them to do it.
administrative costs?
Right. And quite honestly, animal control does the majority of that work. We sell some licenses out of the police department, but it doesn't have a huge impact on the police department.
So if you automated it like the solicitors, or the overnight parking type thing, where you go online and do it yourself through an automated process, I guess I was thinking along those terms, but if it doesn't impact public safety, whether we do it or not, then I guess it's kind of a moot point.
Okay,
So I would agree with the consensus here.
okay, so let's go, Michelle has a question here, because we have to say number then. So 3 animals per household, or 4 if you're going to have a kennel?
We just took the license
Yeah.
requirement.
Michelle?
Leave what we have already.
If I might clarify a little bit, I think that we were keeping the numbers as is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not
We're
changing
just
the
removing the
numbers.
Not
requirement.
changing.
Remove the
Only
requirement, keep the
removing
numbers the
license
same.
That-
requirement.
Yeah,
And
the
the kennel
ordinance.
is typically a commercial business, so I
That
don't
would
know
stay
if you
put.
wanted to keep that,
The over 3 dog license would stay put. This is
That-
the 1 to 3,
yes,
pet,
pet and the.
No
four
intent,
license,
and
yeah.
the four
not
chickens.
business intent or mass.
Doesn't include
Amount.
newborn puppies that are gonna eventually go away, though.
Right.
That's
That's
a
also
good-
addressed in.
You're
the
offering a
Yeah.
kennel.
okay, it's in the code.
Yep.
Okay,
So I think we're okay, just removing the license, right?
so no cost, but the numbers are intact,
No license.
No
And-
license.
no license cost,
Right, and no license requirement.
and, requirement. But the number is intact, and we still won't know anyway, because
We're guessing. I mean,
unless somebody complains, just like the neighborhood that complains about the chickens.
Yeah, the 100 chickens. I would complain about that.
I wanna go.
Yeah.
You
So-
can exchange for the smell.
Yeah, because I look at those numbers when I first read the background, it stayed the same up to 2017, and I'm thinking, and then it jumped in 2018, and I'm thinking, I know there are more cats and more dogs and more ferrets in the city than that number.
It's kind of interesting that the pet owners are more likely to reclaim their dog than their cat.
Cats are harder to catch.
Okay.
Owners reclaim dogs, cats reclaim owners.
Oh, that's how that
Oh,
works.
okay. Okay, Lynn, is this clear then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, really, you're just eliminating
Yeah,
the
we're
licensing
just
and changing
eliminating
nothing else.
the license and the cost.
Yeah, this is
All we're doing is making sure that the number is the same, so it's not, we all have to live in harmony, and if you have too many pets in one home, it's going to cause a hardship for your neighbor. I mean, it's just like anything else. Then it comes back to police, because then you have to go back and try and reestablish the harmony in that neighborhood, but yeah, we're gonna have to find a way of getting that done, so, Dan?
I think this was a good move, and thanks to Councilmember Schultz for bringing it up. This is going to be good government, no cost, no license requirement, less ordinance, less government intervention into your private pets, and less hassle for staff, for
Well,
a
unless,
nominal amount of licensing revenue that is it's a non-issue.
Okay. All right. Are we all clear?
I think so this time.
Okay.
You do understand how many dogs you
do.
can have?
Yeah, okay.
To amend
And
city
staff
code.
will bring back an ordinance to be adopted on a consent agenda. Is that okay? All right. Thank you so much,
you.
Lynn
Thank you.
and Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
Brain out of her seat after that.
The next item on the agenda is the discussion on our CDBG home rehab program. And Jenny, you're going to tee it up and also introduce our guests. It's good to see
Mayor, council members, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Maggie and Tony here. So Jenny?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We have with us tonight from the Dakota County CDA, we have Tony Schertler, the Executive Director, and then we have Assistant Community Development Director Maggie Dykes. As you guys know, I'm going to need your help, Tony. Hit the button on the right, please.
I'm gonna let her
I
drive.
see, she's better driving than I am. So this is a follow-up discussion that we've been having for the last several months on some opportunities to pursue some additional housing resources or funds for those that may need it in our community. And at our last discussion, your goals were to look at an existing program that we have for efficiencies and doing more. And we have a desire to partner with the CDA. They are a longstanding housing partner. We call them our housing department in community development. So just a brief overview of our involvement. The best program that aligns with what the CDA is doing now and what you want to do would be the CDBG Rehab program. We currently allocate about half of our CDBG funds to the CDA, who oversees the administration of that for us. CDA also puts some additional dollars into that program, and they can answer your questions. And there's a lot of information in the background, but we're going to try to provide an overview tonight. Burnsville's one of the I believe we were the highest user of this program in the county. We have a waiting list, so we use those
More
dollars.
so than South St. Paul? Because when I read it, I saw
Yes.
that we were 7 households that we
Correct.
did
Thank
in
you, Madam Mayor.
2018.
And so there is demand for use in Burnsville. So if you're looking to do more, there is a demand here, a need that could be met here. However, with federal dollars, there's a lot of rules and regulations, right? So there's a lot of nuances that our two organizations would have to work out, certainly. I just listed some of them there. There's more in the background, but if you are generally okay with expanding the use of this program with our own dollars, then we can work out a lot of those, I think, going forward, so. And then with that, we'll turn it over to Tony and Maggie to talk about the program.
And Mayor, council members, I just wanted to, before I hand it off to Maggie on the details, sort of on a higher level. So as we just approved our budget for 2020, so our fiscal year is July to June. And there are two sources of funds, as Jenny talked about, that feed this program. CDBG, it's a good CDBG program because it's familiar spending patterns for the federal government. So we like this program because we have a shelf life on CDBG. We have to spend that money down. If there's program income, we have to spend that money down. So we're very sensitive to make sure that we have effective programs to push those dollars out. But we have also contributed our levy through the HOPE program. So part of the CDA levy is used in this single-family rehab program, and there are different cities that have more demand for it than others, primarily because of the age of the housing
Yeah,
stock.
please explain the HOPE.
The HOPE money is levy, so as you know, the Community Development Agency levies about approximately $8 million a year in property tax levy Dakota County wide. $5.6 million of that is pays for the debt service on the senior housing program. So there's 29 units, 29 developments. Valley Ridge is one here in Burnsville. 29 developments of senior housing, about 1,700 units of housing. And then we do the RIG program, which is Redevelopment Incentive Grant Program, comes from that levy as well. And then some smaller boutique programs open to business.
Right.
So we have some of the other economic development activities in there. So these dollars are competitive. CDBG, as you know, you use half of your CDBG allocation for other programs. And so is levy, HOPE. And so one of these efforts that I like to keep in mind, and I just talked to Commissioner Workman, Commissioner Slavic, and Commissioner Atkins earlier this morning about this conversation, is if these are effective programs and they have a constituency, we want to remind everybody to keep funding those because they are utilized in the community and they're popular. We want to make sure that that we keep doing programs that we like to do. So with that, we have made some changes this year with our board, and I want to let Maggie walk through that program. The benefit of this program is it regenerates.
It does.
There are loans, and so they
Yes.
do come back, and we're able to deploy more public purpose with those dollars as they come back.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I'll take it from here. Thank you, Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
council members.
Welcome, Maggie.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah.
So the Home Improvement Loan Program, as Tony said, it's designed to assist low and moderate income homeowners. It's designed for housing rehab projects, and the purpose is to maintain both the housing stock as well as to assist low and moderate income homeowners in Dakota County. So it isn't just one purpose. It's, we've got a couple of different things we're trying to do with it. The program started in the early 1980s, and currently our program is a 0% deferred loan to qualified low and moderate income homeowners. The loan is payable when the homeowner either moves out, no longer occupies the home, they're using it as a rental property, or the property is refinanced. The term of the loan is 30 years, so we do put a 30-year mortgage on the property. And the loan is up to 35 years. It does have to be paid back. So I want to emphasize that. That's where Tony's talking about the program income. Those loan dollars come back in. CDBG funds have to be recycled. Per federal requirements, we have to use those program income dollars before we even use your entitlement dollars. So depending on what kind of year it is, the last few years has been a really hot residential market. And so we've gotten a lot of payback. So we haven't always touched entitlement dollars in some cities. That's not necessarily the case in Burnsville. In terms of applicants, they do have to be residents of Dakota County. These are the federal requirements. They do have to be income eligible, and that's less than 80% AMI. And in 2018, a two-person household was 57.5, and a four-person household was 71.9. Those have gone up a little bit. The 2019 income just came out, so we'll be those are just now required. For our own local best practices, you can see the list up there. So credit score greater than 580, home equity has to equal 110% debt to value. Assets are other than the home limited. So again, we're really trying to focus on that low moderate income homeowner. In terms of the impacts of the program, we've put over $8 million into the rehab program between 2013 and 2017. There's a couple of different ways we track this, both in loans closed and projects completed. We closed on 399 loans and completed 389 projects. You'll see that the bulk of work is done in Burnsville, South St. Paul, Eagan, Inver Grove Heights, and West St. Paul. And that's because of the age of the housing stock as well as the number of eligible homeowners within those cities.
And
So-
we've absorbed the South St. Paul program in 2013. So that used to be, South
Yep.
St. Paul had their own HRA, and that's part of the voucher program and the absorption of those programs.
Yeah, I was also noticing that in Burnsville, 71 closed, 71 completed, and it's the only one where the numbers are just, this is how
Right.
much, and so in Burnsville, the demand is,
The demand,
And the
we have
completion
no
rate is
issue
high.
with demand in Burnsville. I want to make that very clear. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes as we get into this, you'll see changes in terms of the number of loans that are completed in a year. I'll explain what's happening generally in the market and why we're seeing less of that. Average homeowner, it's a, some of the homeowner profile, 2.6 people in a house. Average age is a little bit older than it is in the rest of the county, so 51 years old. The income is $39,000, and the average age of the home was built in 1965. So again, this is an older housing stock. These are homeowners that are limited means, and these are the folks that we're really trying to assist. In terms of the types of households, it's pretty evenly distributed between two income or two people, single parent with a couple of kids, elderly, and those folks. The 9% other, that includes parents with adult children, double income, no kids, adults with elderly parents, basically anything that doesn't fit in the other categories. The average loan, we pulled this together from 2017 data. We have since upped the loan limit from $25,000 to $35,000, so that average loan amount.
and this
going
is
to
all in
change.
Dakota County.
This is
Correct.
all in Dakota County. This is not just Burnsville, this is
Yeah.
all across the county. And again, because we are a county-wide
Yeah.
program, we really look at the stats over the county. Program income limits, again, most of our folks fall in that 50 to 60% AMI, so you can see up on the chart who it is we're really targeting. A 2 and 3 person household, those are folks that are, again, pretty limited or moderate means. Eligible rehab projects, we really focus on health and safety first. That's a federal requirement. That's what we're really looking for. Those items that are listed and they're in a bold type, those are the projects that are most, typical for what we do. So your HVAC, your roofing, your siding, windows, those kinds of things. Some pictures of some projects that we've done. Again, you can see roofing, bathroom, the project on my right, removed a tub, made it ADA accessible. So for an elderly homeowner, somebody that could stay in their home for a longer period of time, those are the types of projects that we do. Again, siding, roofing, windows, very typical. Almost 90 to 95% of what we do is pretty basic stuff. We have a default rate of about 5%, and that's calculated over our life of our program. So we get payoffs. We get really good. The payoff rate is great. So our current waiting list up here, it says 66 households. That's grown to 75 households. So we have it. We have a demand. There is no shortage.
Yeah, Dan?
May I ask a question on your default rate?
Sure.
How do you have a default rate if
Yeah,
it's
it's
tied
funny
to
that,
Yeah.
Mayor, council member, that was not an easy number to come up with because we don't have a monthly payment. We go through our files and we do check occupancy. So, if somebody has moved out, they've not
Or
paid
died.
it, somebody goes into foreclosure, something along those lines.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
left out if it goes
Yep,
into
it
foreclosure.
can be.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
That makes sense.
And Mayor, council members, we have talked, so these favorable terms is a deferred loan due on sale, basically, or 30 years. We have looked at servicing these loans if we wanted to try and squeeze either a lower interest rate or something out of it, but the back office costs of that, we have to keep a track of. We're looking at it. It's a possibility that we do that to be a little more active, but it requires sort of a loan servicing division, and then we have to put that in there. But it is something that we consider every once in a while to see if we can stretch this even further. So if we can it's a favorable program now, and we were wondering if we could price it a little higher, but then we incorporate a little more administrative on the back. So we're always balancing those two components.
Okay. Dan?
Just a quick follow-up. I don't know if I missed this earlier, but I know the national average, probably Mr. Real Estate would know this. Years ago, it was about 7.5 years is the average time a person stayed in a home. What are you finding in this program? How long are the homes after this process has gone through before they sell it and the loan is paid back?
We have a payoff, it depends, I want to say it's between 11 and 15 years. So generally, we're getting paid back about halfway through the loan term.
So these are folks that stay in the house a little bit longer.
do.
Yeah.
As opposed to moving in, right?
They do.
Yeah.
Makes
Age in
sense.
place.
Yeah.
We often run into cases where an elderly person, again, needs some assistance, or they've been in the home for a while and they'd like to stay in a little bit longer, or maybe they may need to sell, and so that happens quite a bit too.
And Mayor and council members, we, in the past, this program sometimes is targeted for neighborhoods that are starting to wear and tear a little bit, but a lot of times you get in there and
Becoming
you think-
depressed.
right, and you want to do the curb appeal, but they need life and safety. They really need a furnace.
Yeah.
And so, you want to manage how you push this out if you're trying to create a sensation that we're investing in this community again, we're upgrading the housing stock because this neighborhood is a little bit in transition. So it's effective in those kind of push programs, but you have the limits. Part of the reason you've increased the limit to 35,000 is can we do more with that?
Right.
Get it more robust, but it's going to shrink the numbers unless we put more money into it.
At least maintain the house.
Right.
Okay, Dan?
One other question,
Okay.
sorry, things have come to mind. This owner occupied only, correct?
That is
Yes.
correct.
As part of the qualifications, right?
That is correct.
And then if I could touch on a point you made earlier about the credit rating, minimum 581 and up or whatever. Is that federally controlled?
It's not. It's our local best practice, and we've bounced around there. And when you are serving a population that is at a more limited income level, it can be tougher for folks to reach that higher credit rating.
Yes.
So we have determined that 580 is really the bare minimum, and if folks are below that, and we do certainly to get applications from folks who are lower than that, we are unable to serve them.
I bring it up because a resident came to me not long ago, and I brought it to City Manager Lee's attention. They income was down from 2 to 1 because of a health issue. They've lived in the home a long time. They actually had a significant amount of equity, but because of the impact of those health bills on their personal credit rating, they fell below the 580. So when you look at just one of the many underwriting factors, there were significant offsets with the equity in the home, et cetera, that this program would have served somebody, in my opinion, was exactly why this kind of program exists. It's not just about the working poor. It can be people who weren't poor, who have become poor as a result of health issues and loss of income. So now they are the working poor, and yet they want to maintain their home. So for me, I was struggling with why wasn't the equity in the home looked at as an offset to and especially if there's a historical high credit rating and then it dips and those factors. This would have been as sure of a bet, which they all are, for the most part, except for the 4.9, that foreclosure and other things, for this program to help this person, and yet that 580 knocked them out. And, it's like, that didn't make sense, right, to them or to me, quite frankly, because, and maybe it's because they had such a huge amount of equity in the house, but they couldn't access the equity through a HELOC because of their credit rating with a traditional bank. So isn't this program meant to fill in where a traditional bank won't provide the financing? Right?
Mayor Couts, council member, that's an excellent point, and it is really should be a risk program because exactly as you say, it's a grant program that we're really recycling. And so if to the extent that we've got folks in hardship, what we need to do on that is sort of track that so that we have some benchmark we can go back to our board and collectively decide as a community, because obviously people, it's tax dollars, you get the sensitivity, how much risk can you take? But that's exactly what this program should do, is be that kind of risk, because I think everything else you said is absolutely dead on. It's pretty confident. And candidly, if it doesn't come back, it's a CDBG grant program. So
It's entitled funds.
we need is collecting that data so that we can go back to the board and say we want to relax some of these standards because this is what we're seeing with healthcare crisis or anything else, and collectively make a decision that we're all comfortable, because I think most people would say that fact scenario you just gave is a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it's oops, they're not 580, they're 565.
Right.
So they're thrown out. Well, wait a minute. They've got these other factors as part of their underwriting portfolio, which is pretty much what banks and even all lending institutions, they look at all the factors,
Correct.
right? Not just, oops, sorry, your income is $10 below the minimum, so you're out. Well, wait, I got all this huge annuity and I've got all these other assets, et cetera, that.
Mayor Couts and council member, we don't have a bank-like underwriting system where we are. And so we tend to be, I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but policy limits as opposed to creative risk-taking with the bank's resources.
Sure.
And so we sort of go on these anecdotes and go back and say, yeah, you know what? If that's a local control thing that we're layering in here, because we're trying to make people comfortable that we want to roll the program, and it's creating an anomaly, it's something that we would all agree, you know what? Let's change that condition, because this is a safe bet. We just don't have, candidly, we don't have underwriting staff at the CDA to do these on a case-by-case. Those people are really in our single-family or in our multifamily tax credit programs, and so we don't have we've had this internal conversation, how elastic can we get?
Right.
How comfortable can our policy board be to allow some professional judgment in there to do exactly what you said?
Right, and some of this, Mayor, Council, it's a function of being a governmental entity and dealing with government funds, right? We all want to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and we work very hard to do that, understanding that, there are times when we will, some people will not be able to be served even no matter how hard we try. Just case in point, thinking of some of the voucher programs, if people are $15, $20 over some of those income limits, they may lose their benefits. And does it always make sense from that perspective? Maybe not always, but there are lines, right? It's just simply a question of, again, not thinking of things as a bureaucrat, but sometimes there are lines that we draw simply because we act as a governmental entity, not necessarily a private entity.
And
so it makes a difference.
The other thing to recall is that we don't bring these loans to the board to approve each one.
Right.
And so there's a delegation of authority here. And so it's that kind of thing that I would sit down with the board and say, if you'd authorized me as the executive director, sit down with staff and make an exception, as long as we account for it and record it and say these are the facts that we did, then we would have that sort of more robust look at this. But right now, we're a little bit tight aperture, a little too tight on some stuff. And I would hate to have to go back to the board with an individual applicant and say, I'd like to waive these policy guidelines. That's not the right way to do it either. It's better to, and we're going to be coming back on this in a couple of months, to talk to the board and some lessons learned. And we can say, if you're comfortable allowing us as staff to make those judgment calls, we will certainly seek that as a
I
solution.
like the compassion in that. Kara?
Yeah, so it sounds like what you will be or may be asking for is an appeals process with a human element.
Essentially, Mayor and Council, an
underwriting.
authority to,
It's
to provide some flexibility in underwriting.
Yeah.
Again, operating as a governmental entity, and as you just went through with your animal ordinance, sometimes it's hard to, draw that line. It is. When you are acting as a governmental entity, it isn't always necessarily
And we
that
have to keep
easy.
in mind that there are more applicants than there are dollars.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And so we have to be careful that there isn't somebody else in second place in line
That's
who
right.
feels like we've made an exception
Right.
where
Yeah.
they would otherwise fit. So we have, same with our voucher program.
Yeah.
When there's only so many dollars and it's oversubscribed, we
Yeah.
have to be careful about when we make a change, because the
Yeah.
next person is going to have a legitimate case and go, why did they get it and I didn't?
Yeah, understood with all of that. You have a follow-up, Dan?
Just really a comment. This is a great program because it is repurposing, right? I mean, there is, other than that minor amount due to the exception, not the rule, 95% of the funds always come back into the pool and are redistributed to new people. So I think it's a fantastic program, and hopefully we can make it better. Right?
Our board needs to hear, we always reminding our board of programs that are popular and they need to fund, because every year, we put in some of our levy in there too, to sort of work out the edges on the CDBG allocation throughout the county. So we're gap filling with some of those dollars.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So-
Any other questions? Okay. And we're on the current wait list?
Yeah, so again, there's 75 households on the wait list now currently, so that's grown a bit. And the wait list is a function, it's currently, because we had such a hot real estate market over the last few years, we have quite a bit of program income. It is really more of a function of staff capacity at this point. We have 2 housing rehab advisors to serve the entire county. So it's not a lot of staff to do what has to be done, and these are complicated underwriting, looking at a lot of different avenues, and projects can take a long time. At the moment, it may be 4 to 6 months before somebody comes off the waiting list, sometimes a little bit longer. And it can be 4 to 6 months before once we close on a loan, it can be 4 to 6 months before a contractor even gets out to someone's house to start work. Contractors are so very busy right now, and so what you're seeing and what you will see when we've released the numbers to the cities on the number of loans that we've completed in this year, they've gone down. And that is really a function of contractors just being so very busy. So we are experiencing a little bit, it's not that we're experiencing a slowdown on work on our level, it just looks like it is, and so people will be a little bit worried about what's happening and why are people being served. They are, to the best of our ability, but also because it's just taking contractors a long time to get out there.
And Mayor and council members, Maggie, if you could, the 2 housing advisors, they're not just loan officers, they're helping the homeowner
Correct.
with vendor selection.
Yeah.
And so really what I learned when
Yeah.
I got there is how much these guys spend time helping somebody, how do I
Guiding.
bid out this contract? And so that's that's the demand on their time, is helping them navigate that. And that really is a huge value to folks who are not used to commercially bidding out projects or knowing really what the scope should be. So that's the skill set that's invaluable that those guys bring. And candidly, you know, if we could get more of that in some of the philanthropic community or nonprofit and say, hey, people just need help navigating, you know, how do I get a new toilet and bathroom in there?
Okay, Dan?
That's a good point on trust. A news story, not maybe in the last week, where a homeowner hired a contractor to do a deck and paid him a down payment, and then some poor quality wouldn't pass inspection, unfinished work, and the person disappeared. This program is offering some, call it,
Guidance.
Pre-vetted, certified, resources and contractors, and this key person on staff that is providing that guidance. So it's always going to be, quality and dependable work by contractors who will show up and not disappear when, they're challenged. So that's good.
Elizabeth?
Okay, Dan?
I'm
G?
just curious, do you work through the CAP agency as well?
For the rehab program? Madam Mayor, council member, we do not work
No.
with the CAP agency. We do for our weatherization program.
Yeah.
But the rehab program is contained within the CDA.
Okay, so the weatherization goes through the CAP. Okay.
Yeah.
We have a weatherization program, but we work with the CAP
Okay.
agencies too.
I just
And
wanted
they
to
get the
clarify.
funding from the CDA.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. We, Department of Commerce
Right.
and Department of Energy provide resources for the weatherization program.
Yeah. Okay,
So I believe at this point, Jenny, I'll pass this back to you, and I think you're gonna have your own discussion, and you tell
Yeah.
us how it is you wanna try and partner.
because right now, half of our CDBG funds, just to recap, half of our CDBG funds this program for the residents of Burnsville. And at this time, 8 have completed. 71 at one time, so I think you have 71
Over the course of 5 years,
over the course,
yeah.
the last 5, and 71, 71 closed, 71 completed. So Jenny, the total of the funds, and remember, council member, we're still going, the budget hasn't been approved at the federal government, and it was cut again, but Congress is moving to hold it at the point at the funding that it is now. We're trying to increase that because it has been cut. So what is our allocation right now, Jenny? Is it 3 something, or am I too high?
Too high, Madam Mayor,
Yeah,
members of the council.
278?
The last estimate I have here is 268,977.
268, I was thinking 3, but I thought 278, it's 360?
It's, Madam Mayor, Council, it's actually gone down for the fiscal year 2019, which just started July 1st. Dakota County did receive a cut in CDBG funds, and so everybody was cut a little bit. Right now, Burnsville's, it's 261,000.
Oh, my
Yeah,
God,
so-
that is so bad, you guys. It just has been cut. I mean, in the last 15 years, that's what it's been. And let me just remind everyone, this program, the CDBG program, was promulgated under Ford.
That's correct.
And in the 80s, on the Hope, was under Reagan. So Jenny.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'll just continue to kick off our discussion then. So, because if we're going to fund this with our own dollars, we have a little bit more flexibility and we can prioritize these dollars. And this is coming off preliminary discussions that I've had with Tony and Maggie. So we could offer this as a grant if you wanted to. We don't have to get paid back. We could do exactly what they're doing, 0%, 30 years. We could target specific areas of the city if you want to look at low and mod census tracts, something like that. As a priority, we could do that. We could look at different.
It comes out of our EDA funds?
Yes, would be our source. We could target specific households. There's a need right now above 80% to 120 of AMI, the
Yeah.
median income. It's tough for those folks to get qualified, but there's a demand there. They make too much money to qualify for this program and not enough for a conventional loan. So we do have some options if you have some specific priorities. related to that. Some of the nuances that we would have to work out in our agreement is who holds the funds. If these are city funds, it's preferred that we, the city, hold these. That's preferred that we hold the mortgage on the funds that we would be funding the program, and therefore the loans would be repaid to the city. It's best that we have some kind of revolving fund. We talked about the payback, and so we need a long-term commitment for that, for this program, so it can be self-funded a decade from now. So the CDA, it's not a good idea that we just do a program for a year or two and then we're done. As long as the need is there, we should commit to funding those dollars long-term. And as Maggie and Tony mentioned, they have the capacity to do up to about 5 loans right now. That would equate to $175,000 approximately to be budgeted. There's a small administrative cost that we would have to pay the CDA as part of our agreement for their time, of course, but that's the dollar amount we're talking about. Because of the timing to get things going, if you wanted to do something in the 2020 budget, in the EDA budget, we could budget about half of that amount because it'll take a while for things to get going before we have to expend those funds. So those are some of the details kind of behind the scenes as you think about the budget stuff going forward. What the next steps are is if at your direction, we'll continue our discussions to work out details if you want to proceed going down this road. Just know, of course, the CDA board would have to approve this agreement or partnership as you would too at the end of the day. And then we'd have to commit to some kind of funding source for this, what that could look like. I think when we talked about at our budget meeting in June, if we do, I'll just throw this out there as an idea, we talked about the franchise fees, moving the facilities debt into franchise fees that would free up about $400,000 a year in your EDA budget to do something like this, should you choose to do that without raising the levy.
And how will that impact our economic development initiatives and everything that we're working on towards economic development?
Madam Mayor, members.
It won't have any impact?
I would not say that. Madam Mayor, members of the council, it depends on how you spend your budget on an annual basis. There are other things that we could do for economic development as well.
Melanie?
Madam Mayor and Council, that's going to be part of the discussion is for the 2020 budget that we'll bring forward and get some direction.
Yeah.
Because we certainly have enough needs for the funds. It's just how do we best allocate them?
Yeah.
So the questions I think we're looking from you for some direction is, do you want any additional information or do you have any other questions for the CDA or myself? And if you want us to proceed with forming a partnership and funding additional dollars.
So it'll be part of our CDBG funds plus an addition from our Economic Development Authority funds.
Yes.
So right now, the amount of money from CDBG that's going into this fund is how much?
Roughly $130,000.
$130,000. And so we're funding 8 homes with that 130 or less now that it's been reduced.
No.
Four
Four.
homes.
Right.
So how many homes are we thinking of? Because then that'll,
Madam Mayor, the most capacity that the CDA has is to do 5 loans a year with their 2 home advisors, so it would not be more than 5. It would not be more than about $175,000.
so right now our CDBG can fund 4. And so if we want to fund 5, then it comes out of the EDA.
Correct.
5 additional, Madam Mayor.
5 additional or 1 additional?
Up to 5 more.
Up to 5 more?
Madam Mayor, council members, it could be up to 5 more. Again, I would caveat all of that because, as a program manager, there are always a balancing act here. We do have a timeliness requirement. That's a federal requirement. So CDBG funds would be our focus. We would have to focus on that, and we'd have to focus on that on a countywide basis.
And predicting program income is difficult.
It's very difficult.
So
Yeah,
what
and
we have
I
is
do
130
know
plus.
how rigorous that CDBG fund
Right.
report is to the federal government.
It is. And if we do not meet timeliness level as a county, it threatens the entire CDBG program
Yep.
across the entire county. So
Yep.
that's where we would just I would caveat everything. While we say we could potentially fit 5 within our workload, it's possible some years we may not be able to do that. We just may not be able to do that if we're trying to spend down CDBG dollars. And we may be able to, if there's a lot of program
So that would
income
be a
that's-
total of 9 loans.
Potentially up to 9 loans, but just Madam Mayor, council members, we also do supplement this with our HOPE funds. So there are some CDA funds that do go into this, as well as there's some program income. So any given year, it will depend. But yes, roughly between 8 to 12 to 13 loans a year can be done in Burnsville.
And Madam Mayor, one of the things that is, and I have not talked to Maggie about the details about how you would stage that, but there is a concern that I have that we have all the cities in Dakota County. Some of them, it may not be as high a priority as it is in Burnsville or South St. Paul or those communities. So to the extent that you have demand here, the first thing I'd like to do in my mind is say, okay, can I shift can I satisfy their waiting list with the capacity that I currently have? But I just haven't seen those numbers yet. Does that mean Apple Valley? Because the ultimate thing I could do is go back to the policymakers and say, I need another FTE because the program is drawing in more.
Yeah.
And it's got that support. But before I ask for an FTE from my board, I want to see what I can do with the demand that's there.
Yeah.
Because we're already layering in levy dollars into the program globally.
Well, it is a good business decision. You have to do that before you say you're going to take on more capacity.
Right, and so if you say, that depends on how you ask the question. Tony, if I give you $135,000, what can you do with it? Or, Tony, I got 9 people on my waiting list, what's it gonna take to satisfy that? And again, part of this program is marketing and sales, so the more popular it becomes, we have more demand coming in the door and we have to adjust. So it's a little gelatinous right now. We're trying to push here and push there.
Yeah.
Right.
Councilmember Keeley, yes, Dan?
Well, it's, I think worth pointing out that the county, certainly the state, administers lots of programs where it is one-way money. It's a grant, it's a redistribution of tax dollars. This is a program where there is only 2 FTEs administering a program that self-funds. It gets new dollars, grant dollars, but it's also 95.1% of the time, the money is recycled. I don't know how many programs exist that are like that. So this is really a much better program from my perspective than many other programs. For me, in the list of 4 options, it's sort of a toss-up between number 2, the city could offer the funds as a loan mimicking the CDA's rebate program, 0 interest, deferred for 30 years. Funds would be expected to be paid back, of course, which goes back to my...
Now, that's on the CDBG side. You're still talking CDBG, not our funds.
Which goes back to my point. I would be in favor of something where the city was always made whole. And this program is aside for the cost of borrowing. In a sense, I mean, you can think of it in that way. Or number 4, the city would target households earning 80 to 120. I have a question. Why would it be 80 to 120? Could it just be the 80, which is your program, I thought?
Madam Mayor, Council, you could format this in a number of different ways. Our program serves 80% and below.
Yeah.
So if you were thinking about trying to capture a little bit of different part of the market, the 80 to 120 was what we thought. 120% AMI is really, that's kind of the minimum to be a homeowner.
Yeah.
Really. So it targets folks that are still have some need. They won't be quite in the same needs for folks as the 80% and below, but they still will maybe not have as much cash available to them.
So this is they're kind of in the gap.
They are.
They're not served by you, and you're saying up to 120 of AMI, they're probably not served by the private market either.
They could be
served. So they are
served,
truly the in-betweeners that can't.
but maybe there's a higher interest rate on their loan, or maybe they're,
Well, there's always those options, but not necessarily the best for a home. Okay, so AMI that do not qualify for CDBG program. The households that would qualify would be those earning between 75 and 120,000 for 4 people. So is that program also administered by you? It would just be the guidance that we'd give you with this dollars that we're adding?
Correct.
Or the first one, right?
Right, that,
Okay.
if we can.
So it's really, we're picking the target audience. We're just, either we stay with the 80 and below, or we say, we'd like this new money to go to the 80 to 120 gappers.
Yeah.
Right.
And Mayor and Councilmember, the CDBG right now, you're an entitlement community. We're really kind of your vendor.
That's
so
right.
We're administering those dollars because we've got Maggie and we've got the team of CDBG experts in-house. So it's not really dissimilar to that. If you want to fund another effort, I would go back and say, can we staff that? What do I need to do? What are my admin
Yeah.
costs? I would prefer if the program were popular that I could spread that admin cost across all the cities. So that I can go back to our board and say, look, for another FTE, you can do another 50
Yeah.
loans.
Right.
And so that's, and in your collective conversation with my board is what's important about that.
Yeah.
Because it's not one-off.
Yeah.
I think it's also just a compliment for 2 FTEs doing this entire program.
In the whole
Wow.
county, I know.
That's gotta be one of the most efficient government-run programs in existence, because that's amazing. That's a
Yeah.
lot of loans, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of labor
They-
from
Yeah.
2 people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
They do a terrific job, and it is not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do a great job.
Dan G.
So I just want to kind of clarify what I'm hearing here. So you would actually administer the program.
Yeah.
We would be the mortgage holders on the program, so when the repayment finally came back, on the portion that we contribute, other than the CDBG funds, that would come back to our EDA.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right.
And the other advantage is you don't have a shelf life spend down. One of the challenges
Yeah.
we have, the reason we're doing HOPE, is that when I'm trying to unwind program income
Yeah.
that comes in from Burnsville,
Yeah.
that I have to spend now first, statutorily, I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But equitably, our relationship with the cities we're sort of segregating those.
Forced
And the
to do
federal government requires, because we're an entitled city, and you're administering that entitlement for us, the federal government needs to see that we're spending that now.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I want to get this right as well.
Yeah.
So with our EDA money, the payback would begin 10 to 15 years. Is that your estimate?
Generally, yes.
So the money would be out for
Yeah.
about 10 to 15 years, but once we get the project going every year, we'll have money coming back in to
Potentially
replenish
depending
into the
on-
EDA for further.
Right.
Potential.
Okay,
It-
I get that.
Madam Mayor, council members, it is a
Potential to
risk, though. I mean, your
94%.
money could, it's
Yeah.
possible that if you
Which is
took
better
a
than none.
30-year mortgage on a property, it sits there for 30 years.
Sure.
It's possible. It's not likely, but it's possible.
We've actually thought of shortening it because one of the challenges on this program is income, predicting income.
Yeah.
And so that makes it really difficult to know when she's got a spend down problem. I get 5 properties satisfy the loan, and now I've got another 125,000 I got to spend by June. And so we may be able to solve, if on average they're coming in on 11-15,
could
zero
find-
interest money for 15 years is a pretty good deal. And so we could do it that way, and I've thought, I'm very deferential to the folks. I don't want to change their program too much,
Sure.
but there's part of me that's thinking maybe that's a better way
Yeah,
to go.
it's like a 15-year balloon, right? It's just-
Right.
it's-
Exactly.
Dan K.
Well, the gap option for me has a lot of appeal because
Yeah.
there are needs being met by your program, and none are addressing the gap folks who are just outside that. And so that might be, to me, an appealing target audience to try and put our money up to. And I like the whole discussion of the payback. I mean, we may fund it over a series of years as it starts to come back in. Do we have any sense as to when we've sort of reached the headroom of demand, where the
No.
funds available now regenerate and more than meet? Or
Yeah.
because of the constant aging of households
Yeah.
and
And the aging of the
properties, there's always going to be new ones
Yeah.
that come into play, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
especially in Burnsville.
But it helps
Yeah.
keep keeps our homes maintained in the city, which keeps all of our property values high, as opposed to doing nothing and just hopefully.
Absolutely,
somebody
and
somewhere.
the circumstances that I alluded to in walking the city last fall and hearing from
Yeah.
homeowners that were pleading for some help from the
Assistance.
city, these are the properties, aside from those that were rental, these are the properties that they were talking about. And now, to your point, though, it's not always exterior, right? It's not just the curb appeal, it's also interior furnace, water
Yeah.
heater, types of,
Yeah.
or kitchen, cooking types of things
Yeah.
that could be where the money ends up needing to go first, rather than
Mm-hmm.
improving the exterior look.
And Mayor and council member, part of it, you want to sometimes you want to keep a little arm's length on your regulatory side, but your building permit division knows who's pulling permits and what's going on out there.
Yeah.
And so there's another way to push this out too, and that's what we used to do in St. Paul, was more about the regulatory side. We had classifications of vacant properties and things. We thought, why can't we bring some of this to bear for Mabel, who's struggling with, other issues going on in her house.
Okay. Vince, any thoughts, comments?
We would be the first city in Dakota County to implement a program like this.
With your if you contributed local dollars, I believe
If
you
we
probably.
contribute local dollars.
There, I believe South St. Paul had a program a number of years ago, mostly relying on CDBG, and they may have put a little bit of some EDA, HRA money into something like that. I am not aware of anyone that it would do it to this extent, where you would actually have a
Yeah.
program
Yeah,
like
it'll
this.
come out of our EDA levy. Yeah. Kara, you have any thoughts?
So my thoughts are, so we proactively go to people's homes and look for ordinance violations and find them. And so a thought on that is, if we're inflicting pain, I can see us also being helpful in eradicating that pain. Another thought that I have is, if we're going to spend EDA levy funds, and I know the council is looking at getting pretty aggressive with economic development, but if we're going to spend EDA funds, if I have my preference, it would go to homeowners, and it wouldn't be more in the corporate welfare variety. But also with that aggressiveness, does that mean that we'll be increasing the EDA levy further than we had originally planned, or increasing franchise fees further than we already planned? And that is one discussion that would weigh heavily on how I look at this. How does this fit in with how we're looking at our franchise fees? How does this look in with how all of you are looking at spending the EDA levy?
Yeah.
So
what I'm hearing you say is you need more information from staff. If
I do.
We're going to have this much, how much is it going to be on the levy?
Yes.
And so that's when I'm listening to everybody, we need more information. The idea that we help the people in the gap and making sure that our neighborhoods continue to be updated and that they're sustained, and then we also preserve some of the affordableness of those housing stock. But the thing is, what does that mean if we're going to have a contribution that adds on to the CDBG entitlement funds that we have? Dan, okay,
And then Danji.
and then I'll go to
Danji, or
Danji.
I go after that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, well,
I am,
I'll move around.
I'm interested in doing this. I haven't changed my position, but we have a lot on our plate, and there's no reason for us to say, well, there's room for 5, so let's just go to 5.
Yeah.
We don't have to throw 175,000 out year one.
I'm not ready
And
to
to
do
Jenny's
that.
point, it's gonna take a while to ramp up. I'm comfortable putting 2 homes worth or 70,000 up year one, and walking before we run with this. In 2020 is just put enough for 2.
Two more other than,
Out of
to
our-
add at the 4 that the CDBG funds
Yeah,
have.
just
then
essentially,
two-
yeah,
just
let's
so
take it
comes
in
up to
small
a
steps.
total of 6.
Yeah, the CBG part's neither here nor there. We're talking about the
EDA.
No,
added
we're
dollars
CDA
coming from
right now.
EDA.
Yeah.
So, I would say, let's start out year one with 70,000 or 2 loans worth, or whatever that dollar amount exactly is, and then reevaluate next year, and maybe we just step it up a little by little, because clearly from a financial planning standpoint, we have a lot we're trying to absorb in the 2020 budget. But in 2 or 3 years, as a lot of our development hits the tax rolls, we're going to have a lot less pressure on the levy itself, even with franchise fees factoring in potentially next year. And so, it just seems to me like starting out small and stepping it up slowly is a smarter plan financially for us and probably for the system itself.
Okay.
That's-
Danji?
I agree. I think we can step this up every year, kind of look at different increases as we talk about it. But I agree with Kara. I mean, we need some more information through our
Yeah, me
budgeting process
too.
and all that. But I will make this statement, that EDA is not just for business. It's for the community, and that's homes as well. And we need to figure a way to get an allotment out of our EDA to help our homeowners, if not as much as business, as close as much as business. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year trying to create business in this city. We should be able to figure out a way to help these homeowners get something done in this city as well.
Agree 100%. Both perspectives, agree. And this is an opportunity to act upon that. Right?
Absolutely.
To do something for residents.
Okay, Vince?
So there's 6 other cities in the state that do this besides St. Paul and Minneapolis. I'd want to get as much, I know we have quite a bit from our last discussion on this, but I'd like to get as much information as I can from like Brooklyn Park, Coon Rapids, Edina, Minnetonka, Plymouth, and St. Louis Park, and see if we can, what their numbers are in their implementation. I've always looked at this as a CDA area, not a city area, because that's what we've always done, with the exception of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So I'm just right now uncomfortable with a lot of this, but if we can get more information, that would help.
Dan Kay?
I want to respond because I was in exactly where you are at today for years, sitting on this council. Jenny and probably remember, and the mayor. This to me was not a function of the city. It was the county and et cetera, et cetera.
Housing, and that's where I've been.
And
Housing is the function of the CDA.
And it's just, it is maybe the walking the city for the 4th time, knocking on a lot of doors, seeing and hearing and watching over the last 12 years, the degradation of some of the housing, and listening to the pleas of these homeowners, help my property value from dropping because of what's happening next door, that the system as it exists through the CDA is overtaxed and needs some help. Their funding is reliant solely on CDBG and their Hope Fund. And so maybe we're the circuit breaker to provide a little additional assistance. But again, I'll go back to the key. It's recycled money. It is, we're going to get made whole. And that's probably the only reason why I'm in favor of this, is the city will have these funds come back through over the years and self-fund more new loans. And I can't think of another program in all the years I've been involved in government that had that. It's usually just, like I said, a one-way thing. And I think that's what stopped me all these years from being open-minded to this particular deal. So that just to explain where I've been for a long time and now where I'm at today, I've changed my position, but we found the right tool with a self-regenerating funding source. That was the key to unlock it for me.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that there is a desire for us to help and to maintain our property, our homeowners' property stock, our property stock and affordability. And I hear 2 of our council members say, step it up. And so perhaps two houses to add to the 4 that we have. And that means something like a levy of $50,000 if we're going to do 2 homes. 70. I see max loan amounts of 25 from the CDA.
Madam Mayor, it's gone up to 35,000.
It's gone up to 35? Okay. So
So,
yes.
Madam Mayor, would we need 74 because
2,000.
just
Yeah.
if 2 came in at the max, then there's a $2,000
Yeah.
Roughly
fee,
2,000,
right? Yes.
depending on
So
how
it would be a
the structure.
$74,000.
Yeah, so, but I'm also hearing, just to finish, that we need some more information in terms of how much that levy is going to look like for us. I think there's a desire to move forward with this, but first let's understand how much this is going to cost us and what that EDA levy is going to be. what does it look like? Because we have some other things that we're looking at, and that has to do with our franchise fees. And then we have this big levy to make sure that we continue to backfill. Let's not forget what we have before us. So I agree, we need more information, because this is just probably an addition to the EDA levy. Kara?
And also clarification, this is not a one-time
That's right.
dump of 74,000
That's
because it takes 10 years before it funds again, so it would be 10 years
We'll be doing
of
that.
74,000, just so everyone understands
right.
what that is.
Yeah.
So that's it, what we're really talking about is $740,000.
And but every year we're levying that, so it's transparent, and our residents know that every year on the EDA levy.
Let's clarify the financial
Yeah.
portion of
Yeah,
this.
we haven't gone through that budget process
No,
yet. There's
that's
things
why
we're
we need
doing.
more
We're being told
information.
that we may have an extra $400,000
that's
in the
the
EDA
reason-
that we can do something
Yeah,
with.
well,
so
let's make
it
sure we
doesn't,
get
it doesn't
all-
mean that you
No,
have
no.
to increase the
But
levy.
let's make sure we have all of the information, because right now that's the amount that we have.
Exactly.
So what does that mean
Yep,
if we
I
have
hear
to
you.
levy? And if our staff tells us that we have 400,000 someplace that we can
Yep.
use, then I want to know that,
I agree.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because the thing is, we've got something
Eliminate 500
on the levy right now to get to the max tax. What was that? Is it 8?
6.
6?
I think it was
8, that's what I thought. So I'm pretty
I don't
scary
know.
about a lot of that, so I need more information.
And
Yeah.
mapping it out would be helpful. I think like a visual map out of
Yeah.
what it would look like. Not only would help us, but
Yeah.
would help our residents
Yeah.
picture this as well.
So I think one of the things is that there is consensus to move forward, but we're doing it in a cautious way until we get better information as we look at the budget and the levy for 2020. But I can't thank you both enough, because
Pleasure.
I've been sitting here understanding CDBG and fighting at the federal level to make sure that we still get those entitlement funds. But at the same time, we have new council members who need to understand how CDBG works and how HOPE works in all of this. And HOPE really has been used more for senior housing.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, and so that helps, and now if we're going to use some of our EDA funds to supplement so that we can have greater capacity to help our residents, then we need to understand that better. But thank you, Tony and
Thank
Maggie,
you. Thank you for
for
having me.
coming in, and also thank you for all the work that you do, because I know that what you do makes a difference in the lives of a lot of people, a lot of folks in Burnsville. And I know we have some challenges because a lot of our new rental facility owners have pulled out of the vouchers. So those, what people call Section 8, there's not that much in Burnsville anymore, because the new owners of the apartment buildings have said they're out of that market. They're doing market rate homes. So, but thank you for everything
very
that
much.
you do. I really appreciate the
Our staff
partnership.
appreciates.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the support.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is the local option sales tax. Melanie?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. You have before you a discussion to talk about, really what are the next.
Yeah, oh,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Can we take like a 5-minute break?
absolutely. We will recess and take a 5-minute break, and then we will reconvene.
Run.
Okay.
Did you line? just popped
Yeah,
up.
it's on there.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Here we are.
It's on
I
there.
was just looking at that screen.
Yeah,
Okay.
no.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. We have before you the discussion of the local option sales tax. As you recall, this has been an issue before you. There's a significant amount of background information. There's also a white paper that was prepared last year as the governance process was started. At that time, the council decided to kind of call pause on the process and say, let's wait for the 2019 legislative session to proceed, because there were a number of local option sales tax before the legislature. In fact, there were 17 new or increased, 3 of which were in the metro area, which is highly unusual. So there were 3 that were approved, but in addition to approving them, the legislature also changed the process by which local option sales tax can be approved by a local unit of government. So because of that, and because of council direction, we wanted to come back and visit with you about what are your next steps for this issue. Continue the governance process, put it on hold, or do something entirely different. So I'll stay happy to stand for any questions.
Okay. Kara, and then I do have some questions. You have,
So our state legislature pretty much killed this, so for me, it's moot.
it's moot, yeah.
It's moot.
Because, I feel the same way, simply because one of the things that they defined is that it has to be a capital project. Dan?
I'm in the same position. It's sad to me that our state legislators still feel a need to diminish the role of local government by restricting us in pretty much everything we do. And I know we're not always in agreement on a lot of that stuff, but just to take those options away from us to even have a discussion is almost, it's just not right.
It was pretty tight also.
Yeah, the way they said it. And quite frankly, if we had a capital project to look at, maybe, but nobody's really stepping up for any of that either, so.
No. Vince?
I'll throw more gas on the fire that, they made it a lot more difficult. And so I don't know that there's much worth to invest any more energy in it until it potentially gets reversed. And another thing we discussed this morning at our Metro Cities is that they're putting potentially franchise fees on the same chopping block.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we need to, they can grandfather us in, if you remember the discussion, so we need to make sure we get that done now before the legislative session convenes in January, because if we do it, then we can be grandfathered in rather than no more. Because remember, I know this, the House members who have been working on this, and I also saw them when I went to lunch at Chianti Grill and saw these 2 legislators having a nice conversation, and so I talked to them about what they were conversing about, and we need to work on getting our franchise
I
fees
just want
moving
to add one
forward.
thing to that also. It's hopefully someday our local or our legislators will have a little change of mind about local control again. And I'm happy to see that there are some metro cities that do have a local option that we're going to actually be able to see how that impacted those cities so that we can make good decisions on what we're going to do.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at what they were asking for, Elk River, Excelsior, and West St. Paul, it was very specific.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
But I just want to see
So-
what the impact of a local option to their economy does.
Yeah.
Because there's all this stuff
Okay.
out there that all the business
So-
will disappear. I don't believe that.
Kara says moot, I say moot, Dan says moot, Vince says moot. What about you, DK?
My position hasn't changed from
Yeah,
the
because
last time we discussed this.
I wasn't a fan of it. So Melanie, really easy. Take it off your plate.
Done.
Okay.
Thank you.
For the
Thank you.
record, I'm against it, just in case John didn't
Yeah,
remember
and
what I
John
said
knows
last time.
because
I think he wrote that last time too.
Yeah, because the 2 people who were
For
who
the record,
voted
I'm in
against
favor,
it is
John.
me and Keely. Yeah, who voted against it. So, okay, the next item is to amend policy number 1.010. Is that's to clarify the participations at public meetings. Michelle?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. During the all-day work session, the council did have a discussion about whether we had a policy for participating in in a meeting when a council member or the mayor is absent. So we did do some research on this. I asked for feedback from 15 of our metro cities, 10 of which responded. No city reported that they had a formal policy. 8 reported that it was rare, but when it did but it was allowed, when members were absent, to have whether indicate their support or have a comment read. 2 cities responded that it had never come up. So we did put together, working with our city attorney, a policy amendment for your consideration. It also references the state law, including some recent legislation. And it also includes some housekeeping updates to reflect current practices of complying with the open meeting law and public notifications.
What do you all think? The red line tells us, Dante,
So if I'm
absent.
out of town, but I'm at a local
If you're out on a
public
business.
location where I can get a Wi-Fi connection and Skype in, am I allowed to participate in the meeting?
Technically, yes,
Yeah.
you can participate. What we would need to do is notice where your location is going to be, and that location would need to be public. And then we would
You
need
can't
to.
be sitting in
we
your-
would need to
your
meet the
room.
state requirements of ensuring that everybody in this location would be able to see and hear everything that you were contributing to the conversation.
So for instance, if 3 of us were at a
conference,
an LMC conference, and we really
Or an
needed to
LLC
have our
conference.
meeting, or an LMC, or an NLC, and we had our iPads, and everyone was noticed that 3 of us were there, we in fact could conduct an official meeting if we met all those, if we
I
did all
believe
that
so.
noticing.
If I recall the statute correctly, I believe that it is required that one member be present
to
in the
be-
council chambers.
Yeah, I would have to be here.
One member being the mayor, or one member of the council?
No, one
Yeah.
member,
So
mayor
you
or
could be
council.
one of 4 that are
Yeah.
out on the road, and one person here, and we could still conduct a
Call
meeting.
the meeting to order.
Skype and, yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Tara?
On that meeting notice, does it need to be the so many days ahead?
It would have the same requirements as if we change the location of our council meeting, we'd need the same notice requirements. I think it's 48 hours.
Okay, so
But-
48 hours ahead, I'm at
When-
Starbucks.
When the packet goes out, we would need to notice it
Yeah.
with that.
Or the other is that instead of FaceTiming in or any of that, you could, according to this as well, is to write in and your thoughts and your vote on an item.
Which could be read. And
That could be read. Yeah.
So my question on that is, our votes are also supposed to take in account if there's public comment and people are at the dais commenting in our vote. And if we submit a vote ahead of time, we're not able to include that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
council
Michelle.
member, if you are not participating
By
by,
FaceTime.
through state law guidelines via Skype, then you cannot vote.
Okay, good.
You
Just making
cannot
sure that-
vote. A written
that's right, cannot vote.
comment or something like that does not indicate
Constitute
a
a code.
vote.
Thank you. Okay, that was the
Yeah,
clarification I was
that was the
seeking. I
last
appreciate
line.
that.
I'm sorry, I did not read the last part of that line. Cannot vote. If you can write in to be read in your comments, but not vote.
This was discussed at the LMC meeting. I just want to add it, it's not pertinent right now, but the meeting location has to be published unless you're in a member, unless you're in the military, and it's not legally allowed to publish your location. That is the only time that you're allowed to not publish the location of the council
You know
member. or
what?
mayor.
I did read that.
yeah,
That's a new
That's a new
recent
exception
change
in the
to
state
the
So it's not
statute.
pertinent in this group, but, for future councils, it might be worth adding that in to mimic the law.
And I
Michelle?
think we just referenced that we
Yeah.
follow the state law.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Okay,
Madam Mayor?
yes,
Question.
DK.
Is that limit of number of times in a year, was that just for the military exception, or was, I thought I read somewhere where it was 3?
It is 3.
Is it 3 period for anybody and everybody, or was that just related to the military's non-disclosure of location?
I think in our policy, we have 3 for everybody, is how we've stated it. I could double check the statute and see if it applies. I know that it applies to the military
Sure.
exception. I'm not sure if it applies to all other instances.
I
could check
suppose
on
it's
that.
probably logical to put some limitation on it, so a person isn't relocating to Florida temporarily for 5 months and 28 days.
Yeah.
And doing all their meetings
Yeah,
remotely.
that's right. When
I
a
think
snowbird,
that's
when
why
a
we
snowbird
put a limit
goes to
I'm sorry,
Florida and
make
does
that-
all of their
yeah,
meetings
okay.
in Florida.
This summer or
Right.
winter.
Yeah.
Or the winter, so, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and
See,
we
the-
haven't really had the demand per se, although we did cancel a meeting because of numerous council members attending an official event. Had we been in the position where there was a time-sensitive, critical thing for us to vote on,
Yeah.
this, if we had, once we get this in place, we'll be able to employ
Yeah.
this tool to meet that deadline and still be able to go to these
Yeah.
events that we go as city council members.
Yeah, and the other thing is that this allows us to have interactive meetings. But if you're going to be in a time zone that is not conducive to meeting the meeting, to get on an interactive television, then you don't do it. I mean, it's only if you want to. That's what the policy says. It's not that you have to.
I think it's a critical policy to put in place because there may be,
Yeah.
I mean, historically, when someone's missing or two,
But it's
certain things
only
can be
one time
discussed
that
and
has
put on the
happened.
agenda, so,
Yeah.
I know.
It's only
but
one time.
There's just, I
I'm
can't think
gonna
of
go-
any reason not to
Yeah.
do this. I can think of a lot of
Yeah,
reasons
no,
why
I
this
think
makes
it's a
sense.
good policy.
Especially
Michelle and
today's
then
electronic
Vince.
world.
Thank you.
You're clarifying something.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Keeley, to your comment, I think that the reason that this is put in place to start with is because of some situations, maybe somebody is out of town and they don't have a quorum. Or maybe, like, for instance, I've been in a situation before where we're affected by a natural disaster and we
Yeah.
cannot get a quorum. And so we cannot even have like an emergency meeting because we don't have a quorum.
That's a
So I
good
think
point.
that was put in place to handle some of those situations. If, for instance, we have something critical coming up and we know 3 of you are going to be out of town, we can always schedule a special meeting when you're not out of town.
That's right.
So then we wouldn't have to require that. So
Yeah.
I think it is kind of if there's some sort of an emergency situation, or if, like you said, if somebody's long-term gone from the area.
Well, all good reasons. This is,
Yeah.
to me, this is forward-thinking in today's electronic age. I think this
Yeah.
is appropriate, and I'm 100%
Yeah,
supportive.
I'm gonna go to Vince. He's been waiting for
I
a
don't
long
want to go
time.
too far down the rabbit hole, but if this were to take place, would each individual council member need to be in a separate room, or could 3 people collectively sit in the lobby of a hotel
Yes,
and then Skype in, sitting
Yeah.
next to each other?
I think that
Just get next
as long as it's been noticed,
So
Michelle.
that
Yes.
really isn't
Yeah,
pertinent.
Michelle, notice it.
I don't, that wouldn't matter. What I think is the most important thing would be that the logistics of making sure that
accessible.
we meet the
the public.
requirements of you being able to be heard well by everybody in the council chambers during a meeting, that type of thing. So there are some logistics to making that happen, especially if we want you to be Skyped into the meeting, not only for your fellow council members to see and hear you, but also for the public and the public at home to hear you. So you're gonna have some logistical issues with that. I think it could be worked around, especially if we had to have some sort of emergency meeting. But it's something that we'll cross that bridge when we get
Yeah,
to
it's
it.
probably a one-off that
Okay,
isn't likely.
Dan?
Well, meeting that criteria means there's probably going to be the potential of background noise. So you have some audio control challenges to hear, which you can put headphones in, but then to mute the mic. But when you unmute the mic, there's going to be that background noise when any one of us, if we're in a hotel lobby or Starbucks or whatever it might be. So there is some challenges from an audio quality standpoint to
Yeah,
be
I
heard
think
and not
those
have
are
all that
things-
background noise. But overall, this is, I think, like I said, I think this is a very
It's a
good
good
idea.
policy.
Yeah, and it may rarely get used, but
Yeah.
it's definitely nice to have, especially, we live in the north and sometimes big snowstorms come and make it very difficult to get around. And
As long, yeah, okay.
So we draw
But I
straws
think
for who
we've
has to show
always
up
been
here.
able to conduct meetings even with three. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Melanie.
Madam Mayor, just for a point of clarification, that language about being able to Skype in, that's statutory language. So we could do that irrespective of our policy. I think the piece is if somebody is absent and they want a statement to be read, there's a process by which that can happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's the change that we're having
Yeah.
with this change. Mac just included the statutory language in there as well.
Yeah.
So I think we were kind of belts and suspenders at this point, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a good policy, and we're just making sure that we are in alignment with the state statute. And if you want your thoughts read and not vote, you can do that if you're in a different time zone. And it's just good policy to have something on hand, but, you know, you don't have to use it if it's not convenient. Okay? Are you okay with having this come before us at as a consent agenda item?
You could approve it tonight.
Or if you're okay with this, I can take a vote tonight to just adopt this.
Move to adopt.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay, and a motion carries. We have a policy. Okay. Anything else? We're moving on to roundtable. There's no items in roundtable, so I'm going to go. Vince, you have anything to report?
I attended my first Metro Cities meeting this morning with our city manager. Pat Dalton, who is a legislative analyst for the House Tax Committee, spoke about LGA funding. It was very interesting. It seems like that formula gets reassessed every 10 years, and so there was kind of some hinting of lighting that fire back up and seeing if the formula needs to be looked at again. And everybody had an opinion, it seemed like, about winners and losers. But it was a very good meeting, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So that's all I have.
Great.
Dakota Broadband, our executive director, starts at the end of the month, so I'll have more information on that as she takes control of the whole situation over there.
Oh, you made a decision on the.
Oh, we made it, yeah, I announced that last month, but she doesn't start until the end of the month, so. We're excited about her coming in. The Burnsville Convention and Visitors Bureau, we had our retreat
Yeah.
in June and went through a lot of different discussions, including our finances, and we are taking up our bylaws in August. Dan McElroy's working on that along with Amy, so they're gonna rewrite our bylaws.
Very good.
And I'll report to you on what they are when I know what they are.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on the broadband? What is are we still just doing the broadband for facilities?
Oh, no, we're looking at commercial as well. They're both kind of going hand in hand right now.
So,
And we've had a lot of discussion. Our executive committee has been doing a lot of the detail work on that. And we're gonna get a lot more information.
so are
as our
we
new
trying to
director comes in.
compete with the private sector on
No,
this?
we're not trying to compete with the private sector, but.
If you were going to commercial?
It sounds like the county is going to provide access to other entities that would like to come into the market to create more competition. We would be just access, we would not be a provider itself of content.
How much is that going to be? Melanie?
Madam Mayor and Council, just as a point of reference, the context that I think about is, we provide roads, right? And everybody uses our roads. It would
Yeah.
be similar for.
Infrastructure.
Yep, it would be similar. So, the infrastructure would be in place and anybody would be free to.
To write it?
You got it.
But who's going to provide content?
It would be the
The
providers.
That rent from.
So because the reason I ask this is because we, Burnsville, had put our fiber out there for rent, and Frontier did it, and we had zero takers.
Well, Egan has several takers going on right now, and with the anticipation of providing
But
fiber to
didn't
the
s-
entire county, I'm pretty sure you're gonna get a lot more takers in this.
But didn't Egan, just this last June, decide to get out of the broadband thing? Wasn't it?
They were never part of the.
No, I know, not in the Dakota County.
But no, I don't
but
think
in
they
their own.
haven't gotten out of the fiber at all. They're building over there like crazy.
They're
No.
building their own fiber?
Madam Mayor and Council, yeah, I think Egan has made quite an investment in their infrastructure, so they have chosen not to partner on the DBB, the Dakota Broadband. Birdsville similarly has made a significant investment. We have chosen to continue to work together because we see that there's a overall benefit to doing that. So the intent is to fill that INET need, the institutional net. The next step would be that CNET
Correct.
need. So, Councilmember Gustafson's our representative, so he
Yeah.
can speak to the details, but that has been the intent all along. But I am not aware of Egan backing off of any of their broadband
No, and
initiatives.
The reason Egan didn't join us, that they're so far ahead of us right now that we would have probably slowed them down in what they're doing.
Okay. I just want more information on the CNET, simply because of our experience.
Well,
And-
our new executive director will be coming to all the cities to talk to all the cities about what we're doing, so.
Yeah, and then I want to know what's our contribution to that? Because I know what happened when we did the DCC.
Yep.
And how much money we've had to put into
What's our
that.
contribution right now, 95 a year?
That sounds about right, Councilmember.
95,000?
Yeah, I mean, you guys did that before I came back to council. That was voted on
Yeah.
before I even got
Yeah, but
elected to office, so.
That was getting to just the INET.
And
From
there
what I
are.
understand, I and C were all the same thing over there the first day I walked in the door.
The intent is to eventually get both of those letters taken care of. And Burnsville is protected with our assets that we have invested
I
in.
always
There
ask
is a
that.
protection in the agreement, our JPA, with the rest of the county, because in the current configuration, Dakota County and Burnsville have the biggest
The largest,
investment.
more.
And so there are
We have
certain-
more miles, and this is my concern. We have more miles than anybody else, us in the county.
Correct. And there are protections in place for that, while also thinking broadly about the benefit countywide for those, that infrastructure to be put in place. So we're happy to get you some more information, but
Yeah,
Councilmember
thank you.
Gustafson.
I just want to know, that, just because of our experience, that we had zero takers on the CNET, when from our fiber.
Times have changed.
Well, yeah, but we still have fiber in the ground, but nobody's still.
I know.
But
I'm
our,
just saying, times have changed.
yeah,
From my perspective, I think the reason we haven't had any takers since then, even though the markets has changed, is I doubt people even know that it exists. We haven't marketed it, we haven't
no,
put
well,
anything
Frontier
behind
was
it. We
marketing
haven't-
it because they were they were taking, and then they were the content provider
I
and
know,
marketing
because we
it.
said, let's not get in the retail business, let's
Yeah.
use our backbone, sell the
Yeah.
excess, but, yeah, I doubt Frontiers
One of the issues, we don't have fiber to the door here.
do that either.
No, ours is
It's
just,
the
yeah,
streets right now.
yeah.
Right.
But that's all the other part of all of the expense. Fiber to the door is much more expensive than fiber
I
to
get
the
it.
curb. Yeah,
So I wish the current providers would work with the city when we open up roads and start doing some of that, but they don't.
yeah, okay. I just need more information. Kara,
Nothing to report.
Dan?
I have an I-35 update. Let's see, he is the Connected Automated Vehicle Expert, Office Director, Jay Heitpas from MnDOT came in and did a presentation. Presentation was so good at our Metro Cities Transportation meeting that happened yesterday. I recommended and sent information that this gentleman come in and present to that group because it was a very, very informative presentation on autonomous vehicles. I'll just try and do highlights here. 6 major impacts of connected automated vehicles. They refer to it as CAV. Most people refer to it as autonomous vehicles or self-driving cars. Greater mobility and equity, lots of opportunity for Enable, folks to get around using connected automated vehicles. Workforce impacts, of course. Traffic operations, transportation, this is always a discussion. Economic development, infrastructure, obviously that's going to change a little bit with connected and automated. And then, of course, health and our environment, because we're talking about mostly electric vehicles. So some key takeaways. One thing he noted was fake news, the fear of the automated vehicle or autonomous vehicle. Majority of people in their survey feared it. It was very new and scary to many people. They're approaching it, and this is a byproduct. This study and this presentation was a byproduct of Governor Dayton's task force that he put in place many years ago, and it still continues on under Governor Walz. They call it the ACEs. It's A is for automated, C is for connected, E is for electric, and S for shared, or it's the ACEs program. It all works on using various technology, cameras, radar, LiDAR, thermal cameras, computers, etc. And how it communicates, cameras see everything around it. So these 360 cameras that you'll see on a lot of these cars, like a particular Tesla brand. He talked about truck platooning, saves 10% fuel on the back truck, 4 to 5% savings on the lead truck. The big takeaway was understanding the different types of automated vehicles, and there are 5 levels. Today, most of us drive 0 level, which is no assist, unless you have some of newer cars with this. Number 1 or level 1 is a driver assist. Ford and Jeep have a lot of those. Partial automation is 2. A Tesla Model 3 is an example of that. Level 3 is conditional automation. The Audi A8 is an example of that, and it's out on the road. Level 4, we're getting into more automation that's considered high automation. It's probably going to be in transit vehicles first. And there's a company called Easy Mile Shuttle Services, which is deploying tests of level 4 high automation transit. They've done some tests. In fact, Minnesota, during the Super Bowl, was a recipient of Easy Mile shuttle test. And then level 5 is the top end, full automation. There's none of those that exist yet, but it is truly that visionary where the door opens up like an airplane. You get in, you tell it where you want to go, and it takes you there, and it's completely hands-off. So a lot of exciting things. This, like I said, this dispelled a lot of myths and misconceptions for a lot of people. Let's see if there's anything really. The state, MnDOT, has targeted Highway 55 from downtown west to an undefined terminus point to be the first corridor that could get the technology installed under the pavement, in the easement or the utility lines underground, and on signage and et cetera. So they call it the SPAT, S-P-A-T, signal light technology on that route. And that's what would communicate to connected automated vehicles to, so essentially could actually support a level 5 fully automated. It requires a lot of infrastructure investment into the road itself. Also, they noted Trunk Highway 52 would be the next test corridor for CAV tech testing along with 55. So interesting update. Lot of details in that. Hopefully, one day we might actually invite this person to present to us, because as this subject expands, as more these level 2 and 3 cars get on the road, it's going to present a lot of challenges for local municipalities, like how will law enforcement handle a car that's doesn't have a driver? And if it does something illegal, how does it pull it over and write it a ticket? So, I mean, there's just that's a little humorous, but there's seriously a lot of safety and or law enforcement concerns for how municipalities will deal with that. So we have some time before all that comes. MBTA board, there was nothing of really any significance. And then the Metro Cities Transportation and General Government Committee yesterday, our very first meeting, as was reported by Commissioner Workman and others, that these meetings are cranking up for the summertime. We had a presentation on micro-mobility. Edina and Minneapolis representatives, Josh Johnson of Minneapolis, talked about their scooter program. And so did Edina. I think St. Louis Park has something, Golden Valley has something, and bottom line is, I did mention in the open discussion after the presentation that I jumped in at the NLC to a micro-mobility subcommittee of the NLC Transportation Committee, and found the first meeting extremely interesting. We had LA and San Francisco represented there, and they tend to set the trends, especially with things like this because of the weather year-round out there. But Lime and Bird are the companies that were part of the initial pilot of 200 scooters. And the impact on bike, is it called Nice Ride, was rather dramatic, like roughly an 80% drop in Nice Ride usage when the scooters were introduced. So scooters are definitely more popular. In LA and San Francisco, from that NLC meeting, I will tell you that bikes are almost a thing of the past. It's almost impossible to find one in those cities. There are thousands of scooters everywhere, and that's the preferred mode of transportation. So in Minnesota, maybe we're more interested in exercise, and we might keep some of the dockless bike systems. But 225,000 daily rides in Minneapolis. They started the program. U of M began its own scooter pilot program in September with 200 as well, and they both ended November 30th of 2018. This year they're coming back. They extended it. They did a survey. They collected a ton of data. They put a dashboard and an app together to analyze the data and in real time can check on it. They're monitoring all kinds of things from a municipality standpoint: complaints, parking, rider, damaged scooters, complaints from disabled folks that were not happy with the scooters. You probably saw in the news recently there was a pedestrian rights group complaining about scooters being ridden on sidewalks. In both cases, Edina and Minneapolis, and also in San Diego, LA, and San Francisco, and in other Sunbelt areas that have tested these programs, it's ridden on the road only, not on the sidewalk. My personal experience while I was in San Diego for the social media marketing world, and personally rode my first and my 20th in a 3-day period scooter ride using Lyft and a couple others. It was hard to ride on the road in traffic. It was intimidating to be on a scooter, even going 5 or 6 miles an hour, going slow around cars. It was probably equally as intimidating as taking a bike on the road. And so all of us found ourselves, and all the other scooter riders, on the sidewalk, weaving around people, and it was a problem. So I will say that some drivers, I had a near incident where I was crossing a street and a pickup truck, very large truck, pulled up and was inching forward like he was anticipating the light to change and then goose it, and we're coming across, and this was like a 8-lane road right across from the convention center. And I'm watching him the whole time I'm going, and I'm keeping my eyes on him, and he keeps kind of creeping forward. He's starting to go over the line, and I'm watching the light going, I don't want to, I'm not comfortable like continually walk, because this driver never turned his head and looked. Eyes straight forward, just like he was just waiting for that light to change, and he was going to hammer the accelerator. And so I knew the light had quite a bit because there was a countdown for the pedestrian, so I knew the light was going to stay red. So I kept going, but he continued to inch. Even as I got in front of him, he was creeping forward. It was like, dude, you know that there's pedestrians here, scooter or not. So it was a bit of a anxious moment to cross the street with one. I would have been the same if I was on a bike or even walking. They're going to extend the pilot through 2020. They have 7 interested vendors, and they are talking about distribution of these, like in impoverished areas, have to be 30% of the scooters. They're going to do 600 scooters when they come back, with not more than 40% in downtown, so do the math. There'll be 240 scooters in downtown Minneapolis right now. And then they migrate around, obviously. Actually more than that, I apologize. 2,000 total scooters are going to end up in Minneapolis. They're doing a fee of 100 per scooter, no scooters on the sidewalk signs, all kinds of stuff. 70% of the scooters from their data are being ridden and parked correctly. 30% are being not ridden properly and not parked properly. Some very interesting data from both of these cities. Not something that we probably will have to deal with maybe this year, but it won't take long before scooters will be in second-tier suburbs. They're in first-tier now. It's coming, so it's important for us to think about it, and we're going to have to develop some policies. Fortunately, we're going to be down the line in the evolution of the scooter phenomena, and we'll have plenty of cities here and afar that we can model our policies over. So, but it'll be something for law enforcement and another thing to deal with.
Sounds like we need scooter lanes.
The one of the things that I just skipped over is bike lanes are being painted with an icon of a scooter.
Oh,
It is a shared
We
bike
just
and
had
scooter
all
lane.
this discussion about bikes.
I'm gonna fight
and we
scooter
just-
lanes.
and we're gonna-
so they're shared lanes with the
Yeah,
bikes.
they're going to paint on the existing bike
Okay,
lane.
then
So
switch.
on our test on let's see, County Road 11, from in that segment down to 160th where we have we're going to have a bike lane.
Yeah.
We would add a scooter essentially icon, so it'd be a scooter and bike lane. And then of course in that segment near your office as well. But
Poor Ryan and police
complete streets aren't complete unless you allow scooters.
I
and
guess.
bikes. We are working on bikes, and so you just had to open up that
Just
little can
doubled
of
down.
worms,
Yeah,
didn't
this
you?
comes back. It's probably my fault. So.
Okay.
I think we have to do the scooter lane. I agree with you.
We need
Vince.
to do a study.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Melanie.
Madam Mayor and Council, I just wanted to follow up with you on the TIF issue that the council voted on at the last council meeting. I had sent out an email earlier today because I've fielded a number of questions, kind of process questions from the council. So what I want to do tonight is check in to see if this is an issue that you want to revisit at next week's meeting, because if that's the case, we would just need to notice it and add it to the agenda. And any direction you would choose to provide tonight would be helpful so we can prepare for next week. So
Okay.
I would leave it open to the
Process
council.
question, because the city council ratifies the actions of the EDA. Is this a special meeting of the EDA to discuss that, or is this a city council item?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it would be, the EDA meetings are now regular council meetings, so that would not be a special meeting.
Okay.
And I believe the EDA and the council would both have to act should you choose to do that.
Okay. So, members of the council, and what is your pleasure? After reading, or did everybody get a chance to read Melanie's? Yes, Kara.
I know that I've had enough questions personally that I wouldn't mind revisiting this next week.
Okay.
I agree.
I'm comfortable.
That's
We
Okay,
need to revisit.
all right. So it's an agenda item. Melanie?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council. What would we be revisiting?
I'd like to see a worksheet on it. I felt like we didn't get the drawing on it at our meeting. I know EDC did, but we never saw the drawing. I don't see where the stone and the glass is in the drawing that I have now seen, that we were explicitly told would be in part of this building, as we talked about this being a gateway area, and it doesn't look like a gateway building to me.
Okay. Jenny, can you speak to the items that the TIF covers? Because the building is not what the TIF covers. The TIF covers the retaining wall and the stormwater, and what else?
Madam Mayor, enhanced building materials would not be a qualified cost for a
That's right.
TIF district, so the TIF speaks to the finances, but as we told you when we brought the item before you, legal counsel had advised if we wanted to have a higher standard when we grant TIF, that we could do that. And I think that's when we asked the question, did you want to do that?
Yeah.
And we said,
No.
no. And so certainly it's problematic to go back. The developer has already taken out permits. He has a tree permit, he has a grading permit. We can have the discussion, but I would just caution you that it wouldn't be without some ramifications at this point.
Dan?
Well, I'd like to say that I wasn't real happy about TIF there anyways, and you guys are aware of that. And because of the applicant's speech to us about this being a gateway building and the enhanced things he was already going to do, kind of swayed me to go with the TIF. Otherwise, I'd have actually voted against it. But I didn't because of the presentation he gave us, and that was all included. And so it may not be part of that. I know we had an opportunity to make that a part of it, but we had assurances from the applicant that it wasn't going to be a normal building going up there. And I feel that that's not what he presented to us afterwards.
Dan?
Well, I sent a note to City Manager Lee and asked some questions, which staff is doing some research on to get back to. I share Councilmember Gustafson's frustration. I went on the applicant's word in the presentation and expected something quite a bit different. Now, I guess this is two issues. To the issue of TIF itself, what's done is done. To the issue of the building
That
quality
is a different,
specifications
yeah.
is something that we can treat separately. Maybe that's what we're after, having a discussion on this. Possibly this turns into something for future policy related to future TIFs granted, but I think on this project, I was floored and underwhelmed dramatically when I saw the drawings. And I agree with Councilmember Gustafson that is not what I expected. It's not what I believe was the presentation, and certainly it is not a gateway building look to have tip-ups in that location. So the tip-up panels, I think it lacks in quality, intrinsics, and the design and the materials to the degree that I'd like to revisit it to make sure that it is represented to us. Now, we're going to be
Now,
having
that
it
is
before
the
us.
application before us,
Yes.
is the building design and the land use.
Yep.
The TIF is a separate thing. So Melanie's question was, did you want to have a TIF discussion?
I think it's difficult to separate personally.
I agree, but I think we have to because of
You have to separate
the decision is
one
the decision
yeah.
that we made for future TIF quality intrinsic building require that. I think you gave us the open door and we passed. I think we got. I'm realizing, oops, we made a boo boo there. Let's go back and revisit that for any future economic development TIF applicants. So that's the discussion. That's not necessarily to have next week, but next week we are going to have the building application presented with the design elements, and that I think is what we're going to end up voting on.
That's what we vote on. And Jenny, I know it came from the Planning Commission unanimous, and I would suggest that it goes on a regular agenda rather than on a consent.
Last night's was.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the application that's being considered is a conditional use permit for a retaining wall, not the building. Conditional use permit for building height. So to the extent the architectural materials relate to the height, we have a rational nexus there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the building meets your ordinance.
It does.
There's a
It
variance
does.
for plantings, there's a variance for sign.
Yeah,
So this is not a PUD where it's negotiated. So your most leverage in negotiating was with the TIF, not the land use, because it meets the ordinance for materials.
Can we get a legal opinion on that?
We have consulted with our
I'd
legal.
like to see that.
Certainly, we've got consulted with our legal counsel on that. One thing that they have suggested, while not completely non-problematic, is that the council could revisit the question of enhanced building materials.
Yeah.
Which was asked at the last meeting, and I think Councilmember Keeley's point, the council
That's
chose
it.
not to put anything in writing at that time. So that is where the council's authority would lie, or ability, to Jenny's point, the building being brought before the
Meets
council,
all of the,
before the planning commission last night, really did meet the city's established standards.
Yeah,
So there would
it
be
does.
no ability for the council to weigh in
Yeah.
on that element. So,
that's right.
they are coordinated. They're two different actions, but they are coordinated.
Does it mean anything that he presented a building opposite of what he told us it was gonna be? We have him on film telling us about the stone and the glass and all that. That's not what he presented to us.
Jenny?
Well, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we did look into the materials and into the specs, which were in very small print on the planning plan, and looked into the manufacturer. We believe what he's proposing does have Casota stone on it. So it's not the entire building. Most of the building is a rock face block, as was presented in the plans, with the glass, and the Casota stone is on the side of the entryways, as talked about at the planning commission.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Kara first.
When we had the discussion about if we wanted to do TIF or if we did not want to do TIF for this area, and I agree the vote happened. Listening to my fellow city council members, I felt TIF was not appropriate in this situation simply because for a building of a size that, was on there before, do the 40,000 square feet, it was shovel ready. And so I felt that was an inappropriate use of TIF because the applicant wished to do something larger, then they would need to go further with the land development. But my opinion was, that's great, but that's on you. But in listening to my fellow city councilors, I will say this. They did seem to be more amenable to granting TIF because of how the applicant presented how the building would look, how it would function, the appearance of it, all of that wrapped up into it. And that did appear to sway, looking at the discussions, granting TIF yes or no, up and down. And now, looking at what is there and what is being offered in the building, there is the question of if that argument persuaded the majority of council to grant TIF, and that was based on information that now appears to be incorrect by the applicant, that does call everything into play for me. Just for me. That's my view of it. And that's something that should be looked into. I do believe our city manager did ask on that. And the response was, you can do it, but you may not want to do that and set that precedent. And I understand that as well. So I'm putting that out there because I want that to be clear. And if that is how my fellow city council members remember that happening.
Dan?
In your email, A, options for council, while the agreement is not finalized, staff would advise council that rescinding the approval is not recommended course action. Should the council wish to revisit the issue of enhanced materials as part of the approval, the EDA can hold a meeting on July 16th for the purpose of that discussion. So the way I read that is, because it hasn't been put to bed, we still have an open door to revisit the discussion of
And-
materials, quality, et cetera, before it's signed off on.
Jenny?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is, and we've talked to legal staff, and I'm not an attorney, but we're getting guidance from them on what our options are. what we've been told is, this is a legal gray area. This is kind of unprecedented territory, first of all. And so there's not a lot of case law for legal to give really strong advice when we start to get into the weeds here, right? But there was an approval that was given. There's a resolution that was approved, and the developer has taken that decision and made his decision and has some permits and started to do some work and has ordered materials and whatnot. He has also asked for some changes to the contract. It is not signed yet. The TIF contract is not signed yet. So that is an opener for us to come back with changes of our own, perhaps. That doesn't mean he'll agree to it. He doesn't have to, and we don't have to agree to his changes. Okay? So there's a lot of different things that could still happen. But the option, legal has told us the option is there, should you want to do that.
Okay. Council, is that what you want to do? And that's what the direction to Melanie and staff to put that item on, to look at the enhanced materials?
Yes, I think we have
And
an
if,
opportunity
and if he
to
wants
have a
to change the
discussion.
TIF contract, that opens the door for us
Well,
to
that's-
look at the whole TIF now.
Well, I think is it the TIF contract or is
No.
it just the?
Enhanced
CUP?
materials.
It's the development agreement
Development.
that executes the creation of the TIF
Executes
district.
the TIF.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that opens our door.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree, we should have that discussion, and everything's in negotiation. It sounds like the negotiation hasn't closed yet, because the applicant has brought back some requested changes. That's really
To the
opened the door for us.
development agreement, or to the TIF.
And
Which triggers the TIF.
we have to
Yeah.
recognize it, pardon me,
Okay.
just, I want to finish up, and
Yeah.
I apologize. The applicant's got a long history with the city, and he's a good applicant, he's a good builder of product, et cetera. We're doing this in good faith to go back. He's asking for changes in good faith. We're going to go back in good faith and say, this is what we'd like done from the material standpoint, and let the chips fall where they fall.
Okay, Melanie?
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, Councilmember Keeley, I didn't mean to interrupt you. One point of clarification, the edits that the applicant has made are relatively minor, I would say. So I would caution the council on perhaps thinking that we have the ability to
open
safely renegotiate the entire agreement. There may be some opportunity to have that discussion, but I think, and I indicated that in my email, that rescinding and absent rescinding a major change to it would be problematic from a legal perspective. We are a little bit in a gray area. Less so in a gray area with the rescission. There's no case law there that would support that decision. So we are certainly happy to bring this back to you. I just want to kind of manage expectations a little bit. My other suggestion for the council is to take this process and sit down and talk with the council about what are the expectations for policy and process when it comes to a TIF project. We want to be certain that we're giving you the information that you need to make the decisions that you are comfortable with.
Yeah.
So I think we'll work our way through our current issue, and then our suggestion is that the August work session have a deeper dive into this topic, so we make sure that we're proceeding accordingly.
Yeah. Vince?
And I think one thing that might be helpful is if we could have the applicant attend to the elevations and maybe give some clarification as to matching up what was said versus what we see. I know that elevations don't always necessarily translate to real life, so we can see something and it might look like that, but it's hard to put texture and things into an elevation. So it would be helpful if Mr. Allen could take the elevations and the architectural renderings and maybe give some further definition to what we see in our planning background versus what was stated at the conversation for TIF.
And for all of us to
maybe just answer some
understand
questions.
what office warehouse means.
Right.
That's the product that was brought before us.
I mean, he's a very good orator, and I think we all in our heads envisioned something. But to your point, it is a warehouse, but it would be helpful if we could, I mean, I'm not saying we're going to throw them on the chopping block, but just to maybe say, you know, the architectural renderings are showing exposed aggregate uniform rib precast concrete insulation panels with smooth finish. Well, it's a little more technical than beautiful stone and glass, so just to maybe connect the dots would be helpful,
Okay.
if that makes sense. I don't want to
Yeah,
speak for everybody.
Yeah,
but-
well, that's to the point of the enhanced materials.
Right.
So, yeah. Carol?
And this is where I will probably again on this project be at odds with the rest of council. I don't care what materials he uses. Once he has approval to make his building, as long as it's within fire code, I don't care. It's his business. I also understand the argument that if he is getting TIF, you have agreed to strings being attached. I understand that argument. It's just not one that I have.
Okay.
I agree. Our time to have input on this project
Has passed.
was when we voted on TIF.
Yeah, it's passed. Jenny?
Madam Mayor, just one more thing for the council member to think about prior to the next council meeting is if you do get to a point where you are going to make an ask for enhanced materials, is to be very specific with what you're looking
That's
for. What percentage of glass?
Yeah.
What square footage?
Yeah.
What other type of material?
exactly.
Because there'll be, again, more decisions to be
Yeah.
made, so just come prepared with what you're thinking you would find acceptable
Yeah.
if, once he goes through
Yeah.
the board, doesn't meet your standards, what would you want to see? So,
Yeah, it really needs to be specific, so we are all on the same page and we all have a shared meaning about what it is that you're looking for. Okay. Melanie and Jenny, are you clear then as to what the item is going to look like on the agenda?
I think we are. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay,
Thank you, Council.
very good, thank you. In terms of my report, our Municipal Legislative Commission, I think we reported on that last month. And my meetings with the Metro Cities policy haven't started yet, but it's coming up. For the Regional Council of Mayors meeting, I'm going to ask Melanie to report on that because I invited Melanie and Superintendent of Schools and our board chair to attend the meeting with me because it was based on our relationship with school districts, and we have such a strong. So Melanie, your thoughts on what you experienced?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. We attended a meeting made up of a number of superintendents and school board chairs and managers and mayors. I think there was probably seating for at least, I don't know. It was a full room. So it was kicked off by the mayor of Lakeville, who talked about some of the good work they're doing. Their superintendent, in turn, gave a shout out to Burnsville and our school district, and specifically referenced that several of the projects and initiatives that they've undertaken have been as a result of modeling from some of the things that Burnsville is doing. So that was wonderful. Our new superintendent and Abigail Alt, the chair, were also there in attendance so they could speak to some of the work being done. And it was just a nice opportunity to information share about how do you build those relationships and what is needed for partnerships for our students and for our communities for success. So thank you.
Thank you. And it was great to have Melanie and our superintendent and board chair there because Burnsville comes into this so far ahead of other communities with our relationship with the school district and the work that we've done. And so Melanie also reported on our marketing program and what we're doing together with the school district to really elevate our brand and the things that we're doing. So we had a chance to tell our story again in that venue. And that was that. Burnsville Community Foundation, a lot of the work was done around helping the next party on the plaza and who's going to be volunteering to help. So that was one of the things. And then again, continuing to fundraise to finish the work for homage. Okay. And then that meeting is coming up. The International Festival is in a week and a half, and I'll have an answer for you. I had emailed.
I already got an email.
Yeah. July 20th. Yes. And then also for everybody, the mayor's reception, 4 to 6. And we're inviting all of our global members, citizens. And so our hope is that everybody comes and bring a member of our global community that you know. And then Prince of Peace and Risen Savior and Mary Mother and some of the other churches have also reached out. And the schools, cultural liaison coordinators are also reaching out to the families that they work with. So I think it's going to be wonderful. We'll have lots of food like we always do, and also great desserts. So that's coming up, International Festival, and then the party on the plaza is,
25th, is it?
yeah, and that's coming up. And so that's my report. Is there anything else then, Michelle, Jenny?
I'd like to congratulate our local celebrities at the table for being on the Today Show.
That's coming up. And you know what? I'm continuing to amplify this. You know, it's the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote.
Really?
Yeah, and here we are. It's only taken us 100 years. So, thank you.
progress.
That was nice. It was really lots of fun, didn't you? It was lots of fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How did we, I'm curious, this is a fantastic opportunity to highlight all the women in leadership here too. I was curious, did Marty reach out to them, or
No,
did we do?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I
Wonderful.
reached
Great
out
idea.
to,
That's
I
fantastic.
reached out to the local reporters, CCO and KSTP and the others. Well, and then I also tweeted out and on Facebook, and so the U.S. Conference of Mayors also did that. But when I talked to the correspondent yesterday, Savannah, they saw all of that, but it was Susan Elizabeth Littlefield from CCO. It was her piece on us that
got
they
picked up by
watched,
you.
and they said they wanted to do more.
That was a nice piece, too.
That was, Susan Elizabeth Littlefield, so I gave her a shout out also in doing that, because that's, that's the clip they reviewed.
Right.
And then they said, oh, we have to go put that story on a national stage. And so we had it local with CCO, and NBC said they'll put it on the national stage. So that's where we are.
So if I tweet about millennials, do you think I'll get an interview?
You know, you not only tweet, you have to get a reporter to write about what's the story.
Figure out how Twitter works first. But
You're a bad millennial.
Yeah.
because I rebuke it.
Okay, with that, we stand adjourned, and thank you, everyone. Yeah.